Hello, everyone. I'm Frank Guan, one of the general chairs for ISMAR 2022. On behalf of all the general chairs, I'd like to welcome everyone to the 21st IEEE International Symposium on Mixed and Augmented Reality, or ISMAR 2022 in short. ISMAR is the premium conference that always endeavors for or explore the advancement and also innovations in the fields, including mixed reality, augmented reality, and also virtual reality. It is sponsored by IEEE, IEEE Computer Society, IEEE Visualization, and also Graphics Technical Community. And this year is the first time for this conference to be held in Singapore. And also, this is the first time for this conference to be held in hybrid mode, thankful to the ease of the travel restrictions for COVID-19. We are super excited to see the continuous and also leap growth of ISMAR community. Just to share with you, as of yesterday, we have received 644 confirmed participants for this year's ISMAR. Thank you. For ISMAR, we always put the people in the center, and we continue the values that has been inherited from the past ISMAR conferences, including the inclusion, diversity, equity, and also accessibility. So therefore, we continue with the programs that includes the idea scholarships, mentors and mentees, student volunteers. So in total, we have 134 participants. That includes 22 idea scholarship recipients, 34 student helpers and student volunteers, 49 mentors, mentees, and 29 mentors. For the 22 idea scholarship recipients, 72% are female and 28% are males. And 10% of the scholarship recipients, they are self-identified as LGBTQIA+, and 14% they have the disability. We are grateful for the enthusiasm and also support for the steering committee, the conference committee, the technical committee, the reviewers, student helpers, student volunteers, and also the support staff. Particularly, on behalf of the general chairs, I'd like to say a big thank you to the 63 conference committee members. We are also grateful for the strong support from our sponsors, including Zoom, Qualcomm, NVIDIA, Innovim, Oppo, Advanced Tool Labs, CellRO, JIX Research Lab, and also Hiver Lab. We are super privileged to have the support from the government agencies, including Singapore Tourism Board, Singapore Exhibition and Convention Bureau, Singapore Information, Media and Development Authority, PIXEL, Singapore Immigration and Checkpoint Authority. We are also grateful for the support from Singapore Institute of Technology, my university, Nanyang Technological University of Singapore. We are also very proud to have Singapore Airlines to be our conference official airline. And also thanks for the strong support from the local conference organizing company, On Earth Production Private Limited. Next, I'd like to pass the podium to my colleague, Professor Michela Florentino, the General Chair, to introduce the scientific program. Thank you, and welcome to ISMAR 2022.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Frank. I'm really honored and a little bit excited here to introduce you the ISMAR 22 scientific program. Let's start with the quick look at the numbers. We can clearly see How rich is the scientific contribution this year, confirming the worldwide interest in our community? Papers, posters, and tutorials increased of around 40%, and workshop even more. The numbers speak by themselves. All the scientific material is available for the authors on WebPub for proofreading, and in a month they will be published on digital library. You can ask for a copy of proceeding or a specific paper you like on GatherTown help desk. Another novelty this year is the scientific partnership with the SIGGRAPH Asia 2022 that will be hosted on December 6 to 9 in Daegu, South Korea. ISMAR attendee can benefit of 10% off using this code you see on the screen. And now let's go for the keynotes. Okay, we are very excited to guest two important keynotes. The first, Henry Fuchs, today after this opening at 8:30 with this speech titled All-Day Augmented Reality Glasses, Promises and Problems. And tomorrow, 3 p.m. local time, Mark Poleface will talk about Towards the Industrial Metaverse. Take a note and don't miss them. Finally, I take the occasion to thank on behalf of all general chairs for the program chairs for their amazing job considering all the extra work of the increasing submission. I give the podium to Guillaume Moreau. Guillaume, come. Thanks.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure that we all gathered together. We're in a hybrid mode at the moment. So I'd like to give you a few introduction words on behalf of the other journal paper program chairs, Joe Gabbard, Daisuke Wai, and Lily Wang. So what did we have this year? We had submission ranging from 4 to 9 pages in length, plus 2 pages of reference. We had a record number of submissions, at least for the journal track. And for the first time ever, we asked TVCJ for additional page budget. So congratulations to you guys. Because we're not the one to blame. You're the ones to thank. So thank you a lot. And among that, so we had those 35 papers accepted, ranging to nearly 22% acceptance rates for the single journal track. So if you compare to previous years, we are narrowing the total number of submissions for journal track than we had for both journal and conference track a few years ago. So it's getting much better. We're receiving much more attention, and you are doing a great job. Just a few words about the review process. So as you can see, each paper was reviewed by 4 to 7 reviewers, including 2 to 4 external reviewers, depending on submissions and whether we had issue with that. The primary and of course the secondary, which led to, well, hiring is not the word because you all know that it's volunteer work, but we had 324 external reviewers plus the 37 members of the International Program Committee. And I would like to deeply thank all those people, the IPC and the external reviewer, because they have done a tremendous job. So I just briefly list the names here. I guess some of you will find the names or not, because it's going really fast and really small. So thank you very much. And I guess I handed the floor to Jens Krubert for the conference paper chairs.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Jens Krubert from Coburg University, and the conference paper chairs are also Henry Du, Adam Jones, Ian Williams, and Jianmin Cheng and Jianmin. And Henry, you're actually here, so it would be great if you could quickly show yourself to the audience. Similar to the journal track, we had papers ranging from 4 to 8 pages in length this year, plus 2 pages of references. And this time, this is also makes us pretty proud. We received 372 final submissions. And just to put that in perspective, this is more than 60% of an increase of the conference paper track from last year. So this is the second year in a row that we have a journal track and a conference paper track, and we have 60% more submissions than last year, which is really up to you guys. It's really great that you appreciate this conference so much. Finally, 93 papers were accepted to the conference paper track, which results in an acceptance rate of 25%. We had a very similar, but not quite exact the same review process as in the journal track. So we had 2 expert coordinators for each paper who assigned 1 independent reviewer each. This year, also in comparison to last year, we had an additional author response phase, and I think this was an important step. This basically was available to you as authors to look at the raw reviews before any discussion took place, to actually address factual errors in the reviews or certain concerns that were raised. And then the author responses, the papers, the reviews of all the expert reviewers, they were taken into account to come up with a joint decision. And for the conference track, in total, we had around 400 external reviewers, 391, and a whopping 58 IPC members for the conference track, which is also quite amazing. And again, I don't have time to read out any names here from the IPC members or the reviewers, but what I would like to do let each IPC member from the journal track and from the conference track, and each reviewer that has been reviewing for the conference track or the journal track and who is in the room today, is if you could stand up just to show yourself. So I would like to thank you all deeply on behalf of the committee that you're here. And I see people, so you need to stand up, guys. So yeah, stand up, don't wave, stand up, stand up, stand up, yeah. So, thank you so much for your great service, because without your dedication, like all this would not be possible. So with that having said, I want to hand over to Chai, and Chai, the stage is yours.
Hi, good morning. I'm Yu from local university, NTU, Nanyang Technological University. So I'm adding a little bit local element here. Firstly, we have this hybrid conference, so we use Zoom and gather as a 2 social media too. Okay, the detailed information already sent to you, and also you can find more from the website. Okay, for the conference program, here is the highlight. Okay, we have workshop. Okay, at level 2, we have waterfront number 1, 2, 3. Okay, for physical, and then we can use Zoom to access the virtual conference. For tutorial, same. We have same rooms, different time also. Okay, and we have the paper presentation. Okay, we have 2 track, and ground ballroom number 1, number 2 at level 4, and we have a poster at the ground ballroom number 2 and foyer level 4. Okay, for the Zoom, actually is for the paper presentation, gather time for the posters, and we have demos. We have at level 4 culinary room, and use gather time as a virtual access. And we have pitch your lab at ground ballroom number 1 and number 2, your social media Zoom as access. Okay, and something social. Okay, tonight we have two options. One is the Singapore night safaris. And just mention here, 6:30, we have bus take you from this hotel to two places. One night safari, the other one, Singapore river cruise. Okay, but returning time are slightly different. For night safari, remember 10 o'clock. Okay, and for the river cruise, this is 9:30. Okay, we have a very exciting media contest. Okay, attractive price waiting you. Okay, 5 steps. Number 1, okay, number 2, number 3. I'm not going to detail these things. Please try your luck. Okay, and then now I'm passing my time to Professor McLaughlin.
Good morning to you all, to attendees here in Singapore and to people who are joining us online from wherever you are, a good day. A warm welcome to you on behalf of the symposium chairs and organizers, and thank you for joining this opening ceremony. Now, earlier we heard some impressive statistics. The first time in Singapore, the first time as a hybrid event, the largest number of participants ever, hundreds of paper submissions, hundreds of reviewers, and distinguished program committees. I also note an impressive array of workshops and tutorials which started yesterday, and the diverse, multinational lineup of contributors. IEEE ISMAR 2022 is certainly quite an event. Of course, none of this would have been possible without the hard work and dedication of many of the conference organizers. A number of them have worked tirelessly to make this a reality. In truth, many of them are still working to make this a reality and probably stressing about it quite a little bit now. I think I can speak for everyone here and online by expressing the deepest and most sincere thanks to those people. I also note that the organizers weren't sure for a long time whether this would actually be in person or entirely online. They were battling a different future that COVID-19 had planned out for this event. Fortunately, it all worked out, and many people are able to gather here today. The hall is quite full. Strangely, this organizational headache also gave them the opportunity to provide one of those firsts, and that is the hybrid nature of ISMAR 2022. Another first is having this conference in Singapore. And we note with thanks strong support from the Singapore Tourism Board and other local organizations, including the highly renowned Nanyang Technological University, plus the much younger university that I represent, Singapore Institute of Technology. Now, Singapore is a global business hub. It's a center for innovation and ideas. There's a dynamic digital economy and a cohesive digital society. Singapore is open for business and welcomes all in-person attendees. And for the benefit of those connecting online, it's also extremely warm here and humid. The food is great, and the locals are extremely friendly. On that note, I would like to wish all attendees a friendly and a fruitful conference. May this be the kind of event that pushes the boundaries in mixed and augmented reality. May it build understanding, spark new ideas, promote collaborations, and maybe even help to shape the future for us all. It is therefore my great privilege and pleasure to declare ISMAR 2022 open. My best wishes to you all.
Now let me introduce the first keynote speakers. He's not new to many of us here, not new to the ISMAR community, not new to Singapore as well. I knew him 10 years back when he was a co-director of Being There Center, which is jointly set up by NTU, Singapore, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, USA, and ETH Zurich, Switzerland. He is Federico Gil, Distinguished Professor of Com Science at UNC Chapel Hill, member of the US National Academy of Engineering, fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, recipient of ACM SIGGRAPH Stephen Cohn's Award. Please join me to welcome Professor Henry Ford on stage.
We'll wait and, now you can hear me. Now you could hear me. Thank you for inviting me. I feel like I'm too loud here. I should probably put on my coat just to show you that I do have a coat, okay? I feel like I want to honor you that I came properly dressed for Singapore here, but I will take it off, okay? So thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I really feel at home when I come to ISMAR. This is the premier place when we're talking about mixed reality, and you are the people that I want to talk to about how far we've come in 50 years. First, I want to mention to you that there's a lot of things that are involved in our conference and our community that involve augmented and mixed reality that I will not talk about today just for lack of time, not for lack of interest. And then I want to say a few things about, in my view, some examples of what's happened in the last 50 years. Then I want to tell you about a few things we're doing at UNC right now, some of which we haven't published yet, some of which nobody has seen because I just put them in like yesterday or 2 days ago, and at least one or two of which I don't think you've ever seen because they were published a long time ago in a conference on integrated circuits, and nobody in this community reads papers in conferences on integrated circuits except maybe Greg Welch, okay? So let's get started. By the way, can you see this pointer? I don't see this very well. The organizers had a different pointer yesterday, and Greg probably has a better one. I used to have one, but it's somewhere in this hall in the last 20 minutes. Okay, so let's go on. Okay, I want to talk to you about eyeglasses because I want to make sure you understand that we will not talk about really great augmented reality in mobile phones. Does that really work? You want to try it? Wow. Is there a dongle for this? It's in it. Hold on. Let me try this. How's that? Thank you, Greg Welch. And does this work? Let's see if it works. This is so great. Thank you, Greg. All right. Okay, so we'll not talk about really great augmented reality in phones, and we will not talk about augmented reality in eyeglasses that are not 3D spatially registered. Although there's lots of interesting work in that, that's not the topic of today's conference. The other thing that we'll not talk about, except I want to show you this one demo from my daughter, is spatial augmented reality, which Greg, more than maybe anybody else, started. So I want to show you this one thing because it has, to those of you that haven't seen it, there's audio on this. That's okay, I will. It says, Deepak, the student, says that you could see here Miriam, who's 9 years old, thinking about this as just an ordinary paint program. Of course, there's texture brushes, and she's painting this birdhouse, and she doesn't care very much about the technology. And the part that I love here is, at some point, she wants to paint the other side of this, and she moves this without realizing what it took to do that. The fact that there's a tracker inside this birdhouse, and she says, oh, cool, she paints another side of this. But you, of course, understand what it takes to do this. So she moves it, doesn't much matter. So we'll not say more about this, but I think that spatial augmented reality still has a bright future, especially for situations where you have multiple people and they don't want to wear any glasses like that. But I'm not going to say anything more than that. What I want to start with, for those of you who have been living under a rock, is the first VR and AR system, which is now more than 50 years old. Some of you may have been at the celebration of this VR at 50 at SIGGRAPH in 2018. And what I just loved about this is not only did Ivan Sutherland himself show up, but most of the surviving members of his team showed up. And what I want to draw your attention to is that this was a complete system, okay? A complete system in that it had a head-mounted display that has a half-silvered mirror, so you could see your hands, you could see the controller, you could see the room around, and whatever you put up in the space was in the room with you. The other thing that it had the image generation, which they had to build from scratch, all in real time, including clipping divider to clip the outside things that are not in your field of view, and perspective divide. At a time, things like division was too time-consuming on computers, even on the big computer that they had at the time. So they needed to build all this hardware. Finally, they built not one, but two kinds of tracking systems. So I want to point out that if you look up this system on the internet, it will be called Sword of Damocles, after the myth about a sword hanging by a hair over the ruler. What I want to make clear to you is Sutherland never referred to the system as Sword of Damocles. He jokingly said that this mechanical tracking system, which was the second one they built, was a Sword of Damocles because it was hanging above. But the principal exciting one to me was the wireless ultrasonic tracking system. And so if you only take one thing away from this hour, that is the one thing that I recommend to you. That 50 some odd years ago, there was a wireless tracking system for an AR head-mounted display system. And this consisted of the following. You notice here, the guy wearing his head, he's not connected mechanically to the second system. He's just wearing this crown, which has 3 transmitters. You see the 3 of them here? And they transmitted ultrasonic signals, each at a different frequency. Then this shower stall here, you see these 4 right here, were microphones that were continuously receiving, of course, anything audio in the room. And behind each of these, again, custom designed, were 3 filters, each tuned to the frequency of the 3 microphones. Okay, so in real time, you had 3 signals coming out from each of the 4 microphones, and these 12 signals, which were more than necessary, were calculated in real time for the distance between a transmitter and a receiver. And they calculated 6 degrees of freedom, all running in real time. I've asked him, that seems so cool. Why did you abandon this? He said, Henry, you know, the propagation time of signals in air varies with temperature. We didn't do temperature compensation. He said, in the lab here, you don't see it here, this was at Harvard in Boston, there was a heater on the wall, which was a gas heater, and when it turned on, there was a fan and it blew hot air across the room. That changed the temperature a lot. That messed up the system. So because of lack of compensation for temperature, this thing would hiccup, and they built a mechanical system. I'm so happy I could tell you this story because I think it was such a cool system. I mentioned to Sutherland a couple of years ago. You know, I said, the entire system I know is in the Computer History Museum in California. He said, yeah. I said, boy, my dream is we could bring it out again. I think we can make it work, and we have a system 50 years old that does wireless tracking. Wouldn't that be great? Sutherland says, I have a dream. It gathers another 50 years of dust. So at least I get to tell you what I think is the best system 50 some odd years ago. Now, look at what it did, okay? Here is the head tracking, the image generation and display, okay? The need, we always need, and we still need today, 6 degrees of freedom wireless tracking, right? We need image generation that's real-time and realistic, and we need a display device that's small, okay? They didn't have raster image generation at the time. The reason they didn't have raster image generation at the time is they couldn't build a raster image generation system that was real-time. What they built is a real-time system that transformed the points, the endpoints of line segments, and rotated them and did perspective. When I came to Utah in '70, that was one of the great challenges. Can you build a raster image generator that would be running in real time? What I could tell you at that time is that an unsung hero of mine, Gary Watkins, built a system like that in 3 racks of hardware that had polygons put in one side, and what came out on the other side was a real-time raster image generator. And it became the heart of the first general-purpose flight simulator that was built by Evans and Sutherland for Rediffusion, that was used commercially for years and years. But in 1968, that was beyond the pale. Okay, so what happened, say, in 20 years? Here is what, in a nutshell, is my summary. By the late 80s, you could get 6-degree freedom trackers based on magnetic fields. The reason you could get them is the US military was interested in heads-up displays for fighter pilots, and this company built it so that there was a transmitter on the back of the back of the seat, and then a receiver on the helmet, and it did a pretty good job of doing 6-degree freedom tracking. Any of you use Polimus or Ascension? Oh God, I love this. Okay, what you could tell the people next to you that didn't use it is that you could take a few steps, but after a few steps, it was almost useless. And we should not blame Polimus and Ascension, because that was not what it was designed for. It was designed for some pilot sitting in the cockpit of a fighter plane being a few tens of centimeters away from the transmitter. So it's to their credit that they could make this work for our community, where it worked for several meters. And you could get in the late 80s and 90s ones that were Big Bird that would go even farther, but you could go a couple of meters then instead of a couple of steps, okay? The graphics workstations got good enough by the 80s so you could do simple things in real time. And finally, it was just lucky for us that several companies thought that there was a market in small TV sets that people they thought would buy when they are like commuting on trains and they could watch TV. And so by the late 80s, you had all the things that were necessary for a commercially available head-mounted display system, okay? But from a standpoint of pushing the envelope, it was still really difficult because every one of these had limitations. So for example, the tracking problem, it was so painful, but I could tell you from personal experience, even when you bought really nice system for Polimus or Ascension, to use it in your lab, because sometimes even when you took one step, it didn't work so well. And you remember, oh, that's because there's something ferrous nearby. Oh, you mean like my PC? And so you have to be careful not to have iron-like things nearby because they would warp the magnetic field. Some of you may remember in the 80s and 90s going into facilities like caves and noticing that all the framework is made of wood. Anybody remember that? It's so nice to have all these people here, right? Why was it made of wood when they could have easily made it out of steel? It's because the tracking system would get messed up with steel framing, and it would not get messed up with wood framing. And so we were interested at UNC in tracking systems since I was a student at Utah. And what I want to tell you about, which I bet not many of you have heard of this paper. Anybody have heard of Self-Tracker? Wow. Okay, Greg doesn't count, okay? The people who are in Utah don't count, okay? Let me say a few words about this. We were interested in this, and we knew that what we wanted was something that was really fast. The problem was we had already built systems like this, okay? Because we got a couple of video cameras. We'd connect them to our state-of-the-art graphics system built by Iconis, which had a real-time digitizer. And we could turn little lights on, on the end of our little pocket TV, and then triangulate, and then we could get the 6th degree of freedom. The problem was that you couldn't go very far because the resolution of the TV sets were so, they were like 500-line TV sets, okay? So we could do things while sitting there, but we couldn't really move around the lab. So the idea, inspired by Dick Lyon's optical mouse at Xerox PARC, was that you could build an optical system that went really fast. And Gary Bishop's dissertation was that kind of system. And the name for it is self-tracker because it would track itself. And as far as I know, this was the first time people built anything that was from the inside out that could track itself. Of course, now every $400 Quest 2 that you buy has outward tracking. But this was how many years ago? 40 some odd years ago, nearly 50 years ago. And what I want to show you is how much he got done. So I bet very few of you have seen the photograph of the self-tracker chip. Is that right? Anybody remember seeing this other than Greg? Okay, so here is what Gary Bishop did, which I think was heroic. He figured out, by talking to experts like Carlos Acan, that you could design quite reliable optical sensors on standard silicon. I mean, that was well known to people who did integrated circuits. So these are a line of, I've forgotten now, you have to look at the paper, 600, whatever he could fit into this die, number of sensors, but in one dimension. And then these, you could see these here, we're processing each one of these sensors and then comparing the values that it got with the values that it got the time before. So it was comparing what it saw looking out to what it saw before, and then comparing it and reporting two things. One is, what is the offset that was the best match? That is how much it's moved, and how strong that match was. And so the idea was that if you had a bunch of these looking out, imagine, for example, 12 of these in a circle, you could figure out the 6th degree freedom change from the offsets, the one-dimensional offsets of all of these. Is that clear? Now, what I could tell you is, here is the test rig with the camera lens removed. It used just a standard camera lens, even though one dimension would be fine. Okay, and here is a close-up of that to see this chip. Okay, this thing worked like 99%. It turns out that at the silicon that we could get access to, which was the metal oxide semiconductor implementation facility, you could not convert the offset number that you got into decimal. You couldn't just say, oh, this was an offset of 27. So what he had to do was unary arithmetic. Think about this. Oh yeah, compare each one, then offset, and then down here somewhere, it would be set of ones of which matched and zeros or not, and then it would have the set of ones all pushed to one side, and then would compare against how many ones were, it's like a thermometer, how many ones were the last time. All of it was self-timed because the guy was a hero. He realized in some directions you would have a lot of light, and in other directions would be in the shadow. So all the whole things were self-timed. And occasionally when the unary, this thing of the ones trickling down, it would glitch. We let him get a dissertation anyway. What I could tell you is, I could not convince another student to take it the extra 1%. They would say, wait, you want me to find The error in the self-timed integrated circuit thing with a sensor. Finally, I said to them, this was years later, okay, suppose we don't use this chip. Suppose we build just regular chips, okay? Then can we look multiple places? And then I said, okay, well, suppose that we don't look at any place, but suppose we just put LEDs on the ceiling or someplace. It took over 10 years before somebody was brave enough to do the next dissertation, and he's sitting right here. Okay, my recollection is, it was not until Greg Welch in 1997 that a simple version of this using off-the-shelf optical sensors actually physically worked. Okay, and this was single constraint at a time tracking with a ceiling of infrared LEDs, but still going from in to out, just like the original self-tracker. So if you want to learn more about that, Greg is sitting in the front here. So let me mention then, get back to the main story. The main story is that by the late 80s, as I said before, all three of the major components could be bought off the shelf. And to his great credit, Jaron Lanier realized this and built a company around this. So in the late 80s, you and anybody else can buy a 6 degree of freedom, wireless, head-mounted display system by paying somewhere around $125,000. And he was very nice. He would buy for you the image generation system from SGI, and they had different models, depending on what kind of performance that you wanted. And then he took the pocket TVs from Sony and the magnetic tracking system from Polimas. I didn't put here that things like the wide field of view lenses you needed to get, he got it for you from some guy in New England somewhere. It took a lot of effort to put this together, and then a controller that was a Macintosh. I mean, it was a big deal, but he would give you the system with software, you could run it. And the thing that was so great about Jaron, in my estimation, was not just that his little company put this together, but he popularized the notion of virtual reality. I remember specifically getting calls like in 1989 from some random reporter, from some TV station. And it says, I heard that you're working on this thing called virtual reality. And I wanted to laugh. I wanted to say, oh yeah, we've been doing that for like 20 years. But nobody ever knew about this. Nobody knew about it until Jaron Lanier. And I think that he deserves a lot of credit for basically, not just, as far as I can tell, coining the term virtual reality. Sutherland never said virtual reality. He said, oh, here we have a 3D head-mounted display system. And people looked at it and said, oh, that's nice. Sort of like there were other 3D display systems. I mean, I don't know how many of you have heard of varifocal mirrors. Anybody here have heard of a varifocal mirror? There's so many veterans here, okay? A really great, truly 3D display system has a working volume about, the size of a pumpkin. It's really great. But that's about what people thought about with head-mounted displays until Jaron Lanier. And after Jaron Lanier, everybody knew about virtual reality. So I think he deserves a lot of credit. Okay, now, where was augmented reality? And the answer, I'm sad to say, is nowhere. Okay, as far as I could tell, or I could remember, there were a few groups that were doing really interesting work around the world, some of them represented here. But as far as I know, there was no industry in augmented reality. It was just too hard. It was just too hard. okay? And now we say, so what were these systems like in the 1990s? So the best I could do is show you in some detail one of them, one of many that were around the world at the time, because there were already conferences like this and others that were research systems. But for those of you that weren't around at the time, I want to spend a few minutes talking about one specific system, because it was augmented reality and it had to solve a real problem. Okay, so this was an interest that we had in ultrasound and visualizing the ultrasound inside the body. I could tell you the minute that this inspiration came, at least to me. It was, I could probably find it in my notebooks. It was late fall 1988. My then wife, Melanie, was getting an ultrasound because she was over 35 and she was pregnant with our first child, Sam. And she, being a medical doctor, knew all the medical doctors in the area and went to what she thought was the best obstetrician. And she was getting amniocentesis. You all know what that is, right? It's where some amniotic fluid is taken from the mother and then analysis is done on it, chromosome analysis. Okay, and here's the best doctor in the area. He takes, the ultrasound transducer, moves it up and down her belly, and then finds a place that he wants to sample. And he literally, this is what he did. He has the transducer, and he puts his thumb in the place like this, okay? And then he puts the transducer down and picks up this needle that's about this long, and he carefully positions it near the tip of his thumb, and then he goes, jab. I think I jumped off the floor when I saw this. Of course, everything was fine. Sam is now, a healthy, whatever it is, 33-year-old. But at the time I thought, how could this be? Aren't you afraid? I said that you're gonna hit, some part of the baby or the mother. He said, no, it's just amniotic fluid. You just need to keep away from, something. But I said, isn't this like, wouldn't you like to look inside it? Wouldn't you like to have some guidance when you're doing that? He said, yeah, maybe. So we started working with him on, can we see inside the mother, who's pregnant, and then have guidance for the needle. I remember telling Melanie, I don't think we're gonna get this done in time for this baby, who was due in January, but if we're lucky enough to have another child, maybe when you're pregnant, maybe we could get a time. So here's what I could tell you. This was 1988. I'm showing you a system for 1996. Now, I don't want to bore you with how bad things looked in 1992 or 1993. I just want to tell you it was so disappointing to me that the only thing that kept me going was when the same obstetrician, Vern Katz, came and saw our system from like 1992, and we had, through all the paperwork, gotten permission to try this on a pregnant woman. And he tries this and he says, oh, this is pretty good. I said, what do you mean pretty good? I can't even tell if there's a baby inside or if this is intestines. He said, no, you see, I could tell this is sort of where the head is, right? But by 1996, we were at a point where we could try it, not just looking at the volume of the fetus. It was at a time where we could track something down to a small tumor. So let me show you this here. Okay, so here, this is Dr. Etta Paisano, who was then head of breast imaging at UNC, a world-renowned expert in breast imaging. And here is the ultrasound machine back there. Here is this transducer. This is one of her patients who has a lump, and they were worried about this. And so this was a case, one of the first cases where she actually did a breast biopsy, which you could imagine doing this in a computer graphics lab was a special thing for us. What is not showing off screen here is 3 medical personnel standing by. her assistant with all the paraphernalia, and then 2 emergency medical technicians in case something goes wrong and they need to administer something, to the patient. It took a lot of effort. And then here, so she already has examined the patient before, but she knew it was somewhere in this area that the lump was, and you could see the ultrasound thing here. And what she's doing, notice she doesn't have any gloves on, so this is very preliminary when she's looking to see where the lump is in order to administer local anesthetic. And then it takes like 5 or 10 minutes for the local anesthetic to take effect. And then during that time, she puts on gloves, the assistant, puts on things to cover the ultrasound thing, they wipe the area. So all this paraphernalia. So what I'm going to show you is just how she is exploring to see where the lump is. Is that clear? So let me see if this plays. This is only like 20 seconds long. So here is the ultrasound machine. You see there's the lump right there. And of course, she's moving it back and forth to see where it is, in the breast. Here is the graphic system generating, of course, left and the right eye views. And here is what she sees, say, through her right eye. See, she wants to see, it's right about there. You all see that? Now, what I want to show you one thing about is from the standpoint of, see if I can advance this. Okay, what I want to show you is from the standpoint of augmented reality, what we had to do. And the thing that I want to show you is that we found out, not in 1996, but like in 1991, that we couldn't just merge the ultrasound with the real view. Because what would happen is, it looked like the ultrasound image is painted on top of the skin. And it gives you a conflict in visual cues. Geometrically, it's of course inside, but visually, the occlusion factor is more dominant than the 3D effect of stereo or head motion parallax. And so it was almost unbearable to see this thing painted on top. And so what we had to do was to do a combining of, so here is the ultrasound in a volume rendering. This is a teaching gel, which is used for all medical people who are being taught how to do this ultrasound. And it is made commercially, it's gel in different kinds of lumps and different things with, for instance, solid lumps or ones that have water inside. So they use this to do the training. And then here is one of them, and you could see the needle goes in and pretty much matches here. You see the needle here, and it's pretty much in the center of that lump. Can you see that from back there? All right. Notice what we had to do. I mean, there's other ways that we could have done this, but what we did is we implemented a synthetic opening that the user can then specify, how much do you want the opening top and bottom, how much do you want it left and right, how deep you want it, so that you get the illusion that there's an opening in the body inside which is the volume rendering of the ultrasound. Is that clear? So that was a crucial part of having this, basically a virtual visualization aid. Okay, so that is one example of what we had to do. Here's the other thing that we had to do. If you look carefully at that video with Etta Paisano, what you saw was a head-mounted display that was a VR system with 2 cameras on top of it. The problem with that was that the view of her patient and of her hands was not from where her eyes are, but from several centimeters in front. And that was really irritating to everybody. She said, I could get used to this. But we did some experiments. In fact, Shanique Roland, one of the people in the lab who's, some of you may know, who's very accomplished in this field, did some experiments of hand-eye coordination with that head mount, which had the couple of cameras here. What I could tell you is what she related is, after she did some experiments to try it herself before the students try it, she took off the head mount and she started to discuss with the students what should be made better. And she reported that she grabbed her cup of coffee to take a sip. And as she drew the cup of coffee to her mouth, she missed her mouth, because she hadn't gotten used to her head being 3 or 4 centimeters in front. So we thought we'd really need to build a new head mount. This is the same doctor at a Paisano, and this is the new head mount that was designed by Donato Colucci and Curtis Keller. And the new thing about that was that we took apart the cameras so that we could make the center point of the camera be the center point of the eye. That is, if you saw the display in this head mount, your eye has got to be within tolerances at the same point optically as the camera. And you could see that in this CAD drawing here with a couple of front surface mirrors, that the center of projection of the camera, see this right here, matches the center of projection here of the eye, and the lens of this small LCD was designed so you've got to have your eye right there. Is that clear? And the other thing that we had learned is to make it small in size, because she told us she doesn't want to see anything else in video that absolutely is not necessary. She wants to see it live. And so we made this as small as possible so that you saw, it was sort of like 2 thumbs in front of you. You saw the video see-through just in this place, but you could see all around your hand and everything else. So I could tell you the good news about that is when we would show this to people, even not doctors, just people would come to the lab and they try this on and they move their hand and they could see, wow. It was like registered. It had to be registered, right? Because it was manufactured that way. Wow. I remember Ed Catmull, who some of you may know, was visiting the lab once, and wow, he said, that was great, right? And he said, the lag. Because we went through a state-of-the-art graphics system at the time. It wasn't our own custom one. It was a top-of-the-line Silicon Graphics, which had a video, real-time video input. And then, of course, we had to do the combining all in software. So there was like a 2-frame lag. So if you moved like this, it was like, wait, what just happened? So if you moved slowly, it was fine. But if you moved like this, it was just terrible. Okay, so I think that's all I want to tell you about a research system circa 1996. The takeaway from that, I hope you realize, is that there were lots and lots of research problems that needed to be solved. And we tried to solve the ones that we thought we could make better, but by no means did we solve all of them. So for example, the lag problem was with us, and it was years and years before we could make any headway into it. Basically, in a nutshell, you cannot depend on regular video digitizers. You cannot depend on regular video displays. You need to cut them out of your pipeline in order to be able to have lag that's less than a couple of frames. Okay? So here, what has happened since 2000? Here is this is a totally personal assessment about what has happened since 2000. Again, this is just in commercial space. If I was asked what happened in terms of research, boy, I would love to tell about the great things that were done by various people here, Kiyoshi and Dieter, various people in terms of pushing the state-of-the-art forward. But those were so advanced that there wasn't yet in 2000s the commercial marketing for those research systems. Here is just the commercial significant milestones as far as my personal feeling is. First is displays in mobile phones. I cannot stress for you how important that was. okay? When VPL was selling these head-mounted displays, I remember going to their small office in Redwood City in California, and they would buy these TV sets from Sony. They had a separate tuner and a separate display. They would throw away the tuner, of course, and they would just put the display in the head mounts. The tuners were in a pile in a corner, okay? I remember Gerald Lanier saying, would you like a couple of tuners? We'd be happy to get rid of them, okay? That was the state of the art at the time. So displays in mobile phones were so great, and it was around 2010 that the iPhones got sufficient resolution so that you could put them into a head mount. So I remember Mark Bolas, who comes occasionally to these conferences and who started a graphics company and AR and VR company in the 90s. He was putting the mobile phone displays in cardboard boxes with little magnifying lenses, and he was giving them away. Anybody remember that? Okay, I still have one in my office hanging up because I remember telling Mark, this is so great. I think you could sell these, you know, whatever, $50. It's so great because you have everything you need. It's like a Viewmaster. And he said, oh, Henry, too much of a bother. If we have to spin up the company again to sell these things, we couldn't sell them for $50 because then you need to take orders, okay? Then you need to field calls. Then when they don't work, you know, something is off, then somebody needs to fix. No, he says, easier, we give them away. You want a couple more? We give them away, okay? And to credit of one of his interns, Palmer Luckey, Palmer realized that you could make a company out of this called Oculus, okay? But it was really based on the idea that you could get the right kind of displays really cheaply because they were in mobile phones then, okay? The next thing I want to point out to you is about the same time, Microsoft had a relationship with this startup company in Israel, PrimeSense, and they brought out a depth camera for like under $200. Wow. So you shouldn't, the people who are veterans shouldn't vote, but those of you who are students probably don't remember this. What a revolution that was to be able to get a real-time depth camera with color for under $200. I'll tell you what a big difference that was. We had some funding from another large company at the time who got, through relationship with this startup, PrimeSense, got 2 of the pre-production units. And they said, to my delight, why don't we lend you one of them? I thought, oh, so great. They were, I think, something like $6,000. Okay? The guy came to deliver one of them, and he said, wait, we sold this to so-and-so company. I don't want to mention the name because I don't want to get them in trouble. But wait, this is sold to that company, but you guys are not that company, are you? No. We collaborate, they fund us, we do research together. But wait, they signed the non-disclosure agreement, but you need to sign the non-disclosure agreement. I said, you know, we sometimes sign those, but those have to go up the chain of command in the university. It's not something that an ordinary professor could sign. He said, wow, you know, until you sign the non-disclosure, I don't think we could leave this unit with you. There's a room full of students and 1 or 2 like postdocs. I don't know, I said, why don't you come with me? I'll go to the head business officer in the department, okay? We go together. The business officer says, yeah, we could expedite this, but you know, it has to go through legal. It might take a couple of days. The guy said, oh, I don't think I'm authorized to leave this here. He took the unit with him. Okay, something like a month later, it came out commercially. The exact same unit. The exact same unit for under $200. I mean, we had some depth cameras we may have bought from some Swiss company for thousands of dollars, but now they were like $150, $200. It was just amazing, okay? And then you could then reconstruct, you know, rooms, people, it was amazing, okay? Finally, I think the biggest development is 2014, Facebook buying Oculus. You all remember that? $2.5 billion. I could tell you how big news that was because it was like 5 days before the IEEE VR conference. And I was fortunate enough to give the opening talk there. And so I went there like Sunday afternoon and people were abuzz about Facebook buying Oculus, but they were not all for it. They thought, ugh, this small company is selling out to a gigantic company. It's not going to be good. I remember asking the audience like this, how many of you think this is going to be good for our field, like virtual reality? About half the people raised their hands. How many of you think it's not going to be good for us as a field? About a quarter of the people raised their hand. About a quarter of people thought that Oculus being bought by Facebook was not good for the field. I remember saying, so if you don't mind, I'll share with you my opinion. This is the best thing ever to have happened to virtual reality, even more important than Ivan Sutherland's 1968 system. And the reason is nobody before has put serious money into VR. And if Facebook paid $2.5 billion to this little startup, I don't care if it was worth it or not worth it. It means they're going to put in that kind of money in development. And that's going to change our field. And it has changed our field. Think about what kind of systems are available now for $400 or $500. I remember looking at, in 2014, looking at the exhibitors at VR. There were, you know, a dozen or so nice companies that were making head mounts, and I thought, these people are history. And you don't know any of those companies anymore. And the reason is they couldn't compete with a gigantic company that could sell things for $500. They were selling things for tens of thousands of dollars. And they couldn't make money selling something for $1,000. So that's the best thing that has happened, I think. The next best thing is that Microsoft put billions of dollars into an AR system. Okay? And as far as I know, nobody else has put that kind of money into an AR system ever, before or since. Okay, so this is what I think has happened since then. Okay, now, I have 9 minutes. Oh God. Do you see this slide? It says 16. I've got 55 slides. Okay, so I will put this online for your enjoyment. Okay, but you know, the rest of it is more research stuff. And you can read about these, except I'll highlight a few things that we have not published, okay? But it's the history that I think some of you who didn't live through it cannot read anyplace, okay? So let me tell you what I think is happening now. The really great thing is we as a field, finally have a platform we could work with, okay? And before HoloLens, we didn't have that, okay? So we still have challenges. The challenge is that we don't have it in a comfortable form factor that we could wear all day, okay? Nobody, except if they're gonna publish something of a week in AR, are going to wear even the HoloLens 2 all day, all week. And they're not gonna wear it in public because it's too clunky, even though it's a great system, okay? And the basic problem is that we cannot get it into a form factor, okay? Either you could get it into a form factor, but then it's not very good, it's a narrow field of view, or you could get it into the form factor like this. One of our collaborators is Eximers. I think they're a really great company, by the way. This is one of their systems that they have sent us, really nice, wide field of view, but again, too clunky to wear all day, okay? So the other is the real-time reconstruction, okay, of humans and scenes is still not there. And I think for lots of applications, you want to be able to quickly reconstruct what is happening someplace else. So those are the two things that I think we still need. So let's look at one specific example. Look at, here's a picture, as I said here, from when Zuckerberg said that Facebook is changing its name to Meta. You know, this is a simple scene, right? Of somebody playing chess with his friend and his friend is not really there. Think about what it takes to build this. Okay, so you need those two things that I just mentioned. You need principally something in your glasses. Notice they're both wearing glasses, right? So the display will be in glasses. That will be great. Okay, what does it take for this person in his glasses to be able to send the description of himself to his partner? That is a remaining challenge. Okay, so let me tell you a couple of things of what we're doing related to those two things. One is the data acquisition combined with rendering that a number of you know is related to trained neural networks. After training, be able to take in the raw video and then generating the new novel view. That is, I think, crucial to be able to do this. Okay. The other is in display devices. My feeling, and I think most of the feeling in the about people who work on displays is that the most promising approach to getting something in an eyeglasses form factor with a wide field of view is holographic image generation. What I mean by that is not holographic in the marketing term of HoloLens, but holographic in the scientific technical way that you're generating not an image with light that's coming out, but after you have the image, generating the wavefront from in each pixel of a display, what the phase should be, so that the wavefront going from this chip, which is very similar to an LCD, but wavefront, when it hits your eye, makes the appropriate kind of light so that you see imagery. And that takes a lot more compute. And unfortunately, the problem is that it's got a very narrow, very small eye box. Your eye has to be just in the right place. Okay, so for example, here is a beautiful image from one of Praneeth Chakravartula's papers that shows foveated rendering. Like it says here, you know, here's this image, and instead of distributing the noise everywhere, we're going to distribute the noise more to the outside and less to the inside here. The problem is, this beautiful image was taken with a camera on an optical bench. So it was true holography, except if you put your eye to there, you would not see it unless your eye was precisely down to the millimeter in the right place. So my guess is nobody here has ever seen a true holographic display. And the reason you don't see it is because it's so frustrating to try it. You have to get it just right. And if you get there, oh, now I see this. And we've experimented with something like this, and it's so frustrating. Okay? Because unless you're at the exact millimeter in X, Y, and Z, you don't see it. But of course, a camera, you put exactly in the right place, and it generates this beautiful image. Okay? So let's see if I could go through in 4 minutes what you might like to go through in a little bit more time, okay? The novel view synthesis, basically for those of you that are not in this field, cuts through this proverbial Gordian knot. The traditional way that we and everybody else until like 5 years ago did is we would have cameras, say around the room. We would then use various computer vision techniques to determine a polygonal mesh. Where must the surfaces be in order for the cameras to get this image, okay? In that polygonal mesh of the room, of the people, whatever it is, then we would render, and we would render, given the viewpoint and a graphic system, we would render those polygons. Is that clear? Now what you do is you train a neural network for things that look similar to this person, things that look similar to the scene, and then you say, so you train them by saying, okay, here are 3 cameras, and now I'll put a camera someplace else. And if I ask you to generate it from this fourth camera, here is what the truth should be. So you keep iterating through thousands and thousands of these trained images until you get something that looks good for these novel views. And then you say, okay, now I'll give you some other things here and won't tell you what the ground truth is, and it generates something. So you give it the viewpoint then in the trained neural networks, and it generates for you some approximation. What I could tell you is that depending on the circumstances, these are either terrible or they're great. And I will show you in 2 minutes. Okay, so we have a number of different research going on. The two variations that we and others are interested in is, if you know that you're going to look at a human, then you could put whatever you learn onto a human body form, and then when it sees a human, it has a better chance of estimating what that human looks like. If you want to reconstruct something with a whole room, then you don't put a human, you just say, here is what the place looks like. It doesn't know from humans or nothing, but if it's the same kind of room and the same kind of people and the same kind of activities, then it does a pretty good job. And what we do here that is somewhat different than what some other people is, when we know that it's a room, we use depth cameras because depth cameras work well. And you get much better results when you use depth cameras. So I don't have time to go through this, but you could read them. These are published in the last year or two, okay? And let me show you if I could show you a couple of things that are not published yet. I mean, you could read through the papers and they get accepted into a good conference because they get better results on standard data sets than prior methods, okay? So here is what we've not published yet. And if you're going to be in a room and you're going to be inside, then you could use depth cameras, which work fine there. And you get much better results on these. So let me see if I could show you. This is from like almost a year ago. You could see that you see the whole room. This is the estimate from just 2 cameras. You see that there are some artifacts. But if it turns out that you use not 2 cameras, but 4 cameras, like here, I'll tell you how new this is. This is like 2 days ago. We don't even have video yet. Here are the 4 views, okay? Mike Wang. Here is some novel views. Now look, the system has never seen this view. All it saw were these 4 views. Notice, like the monitor of this other student's workstation is different. It never saw this view, but this is what it generated. So I'm very encouraged that in a few years, this is going to be the way to do telepresence. That if you're in a room, what you do is you put a few depth cameras and you will get really good looking results. Okay, so I have no time left. Let me go to the very end. Okay, let me just mention, the reason that you want to do 3D eye tracking is if there's any hope for these kind of displays in your eyeglasses, the system needs to know where your eye opening is down to the millimeter. And that means none of the eye tracking that is in most workshops where people are interested in where are you looking in the room. No. What we want to know is where is that opening with respect to that display in X, Y, and Z and rho and theta down to the millimeter. And what you need for that, I believe, is multiple LEDs and multiple cameras onto each eye. Okay, so you could read the paper. In fact, I think this is one of these is presented tomorrow by the student. Tomorrow, like at 11 o'clock in the morning. So if you want to know about 3D eye tracking, come to see Connie Liu's paper tomorrow, I think at 11 o'clock. Okay, we also are doing some applications. Could I take 30 more seconds? 30 seconds, okay? Again, stuff we haven't done, we haven't published yet. This is doing AR to help in surgical suturing. Okay, surgical suturing is necessary for every medical student and everybody who's going to actually do some cutting, okay? And with current HoloLens 2, you could track you could track the person's hand and then play him back. So this person is trying to do what his teacher has done with this system. Okay, all done in standard system in HoloLens 2. Okay, so in fact, you could see if I could just.
A key
There's a whole
feature of our
system here
system is the
on
ability to play pre-recorded videos
how to
made
be
by
able
teachers
to
serve as
record
guides
very
during the
quickly.
learning
And the
process.
new idea
The
is
student has
that you
access
use
to a
exactly
replay
the same system
which
for the
stops
teacher as you use for the student.
the
Okay,
replay.
so here is the teachers, and then you can just follow what the teacher is doing, and the system will tell you if you've done something well, because it tracks your hands and your fingers, and you could look at this when you like, and the teacher's pose is matched to your pose, and then your fingers turn green or red, depending on if your fingers are in the proper position or not. The last thing I just want to mention is if you're doing things all day, that is, if you have your AR in your regular glasses, you look around, many of us are wearing regular glasses. So if in 10 years, the regular glasses have displayed in them, then all the sensors could be used to do all kinds of health monitoring. And the health monitoring we're interested in is in seeing how people move who are not well. And so this is based on some work that we did that was presented last year at IEEE VR that says if you have downward looking cameras, remember the guy playing chess? How is he going to transmit his pose? And our answer is just with a bunch of cameras that are in his glasses, some that are looking out to reconstruct the world, some that are looking in to reconstruct his face, which, by the way, now you could start getting in Quest and others, and some looking down to reconstruct his body. And so you can see here, the ones that are looking down reconstruct his body, okay? And you could train a neural network for your particular body so that it does a really good job. And how could you train it? Well, you're using it all the time, okay? So I think that's all I want to say. Both neural network stuff. So here is what, this is my last slide here, I think, okay? It will still take a long time to get where we want, okay? My guess is we should be ready for 20 years. Now, I know that the big companies say, wait, we're going to have something in a year or two. But I'm telling you, because I don't have any stock in any of these companies, I'm telling you, be prepared. It's going to take 20 years, okay? Because these are really, really hard problems. And in those 20 years, what I worry about is the companies will give up, okay? They gave up around 2000. If you read news around 2003, 2004, they were in the technical news with headers like, whatever happened to VR? And the conclusion at the time was that the companies, and maybe some of us, promised too much and didn't deliver. So what I recommend to you is 20 years. That's what it's going to take, okay? I want to thank the people in the graphics and VR group. And finally, I want to thank you for your time, and my apologies for going 5 minutes over. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Henry, for the very, very amazing presentations. Now is a question answer time. Any questions from the floor?
Are we keeping people from the break and getting, are we keeping them from the break?
A few minutes.
Oh, whatever you like. By the way, I'll be around the rest of the week and I'm delighted to talk with you.
Yes.
Yes, Linda, my name from LMU Munich. Thank you for the wonderful talk. I was just wondering, like, the future, what do you really imagine is the reality that we really want? Because you said that it's going to take us another 20 years. So what is it where we really get and what we really want to create?
Wow. That sounds like a good conversation over coffee. Did you all understand this? What is it that we want? You know, assuming that we could build this technology, what do you think we as consumers would want? I'll tell you what I want. I want to be closer to the people I care about. There are relatives and friends that the best thing that we could do right now is teleconferencing with Skype or Zoom or something like that. And I want to feel closer to them. And that means I want to be with them when I'm taking a walk. I want to be with them when they're taking a walk. So now I can't do, I mean, you know, what do? I talk to them, you know, like you talk to them on the phone, right? But then I'm hardly ever holding up this to do FaceTime because it's tiring. And then occasionally I say, oh, look at this, wait, I'm gonna show you. And then I push, you know, rear camera. What I want is not to do that. I don't want to be aware of the technology. And so I will put on our website the sketch that we have that is a follow-on to what Zuckerberg has, and that is this notion of taking a walk in the park with a friend. They're sitting, you know, in the chair in their dining room or kitchen, and I want them to feel like they're next to me. And when I see something nice, automatically they'll see it. They'll see it because there'll be all these cameras looking out, and they'll reconstruct whatever is around me, and they'll say, oh, look at that, isn't that an interesting old building? That's what I want. I want to be closer to people I love. But you know, different people want different things. I think it's sort of like, what is it that you want from your mobile phone? You know, we each want different things, and you know, we get a lot. Like every morning I use it for my exercises because I like the demo. That's just a personal answer. You're welcome. One more, okay. My apologies for going so long.
Well, I'll try to make it quick. Hello, thank you for this talk. It was very interesting. I'm Miriam from Amsterdam. I was wondering, in your very last slide, your very last remark was, let's make them more useful than damaging. Could you maybe, like in 2 minutes, elaborate what you were meaning to say by that? Thank you.
I'm so pleased that you noticed that. Oh. So this is a follow-up to the answer of this nice question. You know, I want to be closer to people I love, right? And it's like, here are people in this room who I see almost every week because we collaborate, but we don't get to see each other. We don't go for a walk in the park because we can't do that now, right? So think about the flip side of that. I'm concerned about the invasion of privacy. Okay, so some of you might remember Google Glass, right? So I was one of the early adopters. I was really excited. I would wear that, but of course I was very aware that there's this camera here and I don't want to be obtrusive and take pictures unless I have people's permission. So I would wear it mainly to sessions like this, in which I would sit near the front, and then when I saw an interesting slide, I would go, oh, that was so great. I don't have to take out anything, okay? But when I would go outside, like to a tea break, I would take it off because I felt like, you know, this is intrusive to people because, you know, they don't know if I'm taking a picture of them, right? And of course, I can't go into the men's room. That would be really bad, right? Now, think about the thing that I told you, you know, we're going to have displays in glasses and there'll be all kinds of tiny little cameras. I mean, there's tiny little cameras in my Quest, right? In your Quest, because it needs to do tracking and it needs to reconstruct. Do you wear that? Well, you don't have to worry about wearing that to coffee break because you'd stumble over things. But if those same cameras were in your AR glasses, it would be really intrusive, right? And think about if some bad actors, whether it's government or others, got use of that data, how much they would know about where you are and who you talk to. You know, it could be a tool for bad things to happen. So I really worry about that. And I think that the way that we can do this is to think about what are the things that we individually worry about? And then as researchers, we think about how we could make things so that they would be for good rather than for evil. So one example that I've been thinking about is to look at this 45-year-old system that does tracking by looking out. It never gets an image, right? It just has this one-dimensional thing. That one-dimensional sensors, it never goes off the chip. It cannot go off the chip because the only thing that goes off the chip is how far it's moved and how strong the correlation is. And you cannot put together a picture of you. There is no picture. All it got is how far this thing has moved since the last millisecond. So that's one example of how we might be able to, as researchers, do something that would not be safe or bad. Because suppose some bad actor got a hold of it. What could they do? They couldn't get a picture of it. There's no picture anywhere, right? They couldn't reconstruct. The best they could do is, where I've been and how I've moved. I hope that's sort of an answer. I mean, I think we should each think about what it is that we're worried about and see if, as researchers, we could work toward pushing the systems more toward the good rather than toward the evil.
We have Zoom audience. One more last question.
Yes.
Okay.
On what other new industries do you expect to influence and enable smart glasses over the coming decade or two? Wow, a really good question. Did you all hear that? What new industries? And I don't have any better idea than I think the rest of us. The one hint that I would give is that I think this next revolution is going to be in some ways analogous to the revolution of smartphones. Okay? At least even when I bought my first smartphone in 1992 or something, couldn't imagine all the things that it would be useful for a decade later. And I think that the smart glasses are going to be way more useful than even smartphones, because they'll be just an add-on to the smartphones. If I had to pick anything, my own bias is healthcare. I think healthcare is going to be just revolutionized, because if the system knows a lot about me and knows a lot about other people that are willing to share it, then the aggregation of data could lead to all kinds of breakthroughs of early warning. I'm moving slightly differently, and people that move slightly differently, a couple of days later had bad things happen. We have so little health data now. I think we're going to have a revolution in healthcare.
Thank you so much. We have coffee break.
Yes.
And continue.
Thank you so much for staying here.
Thank you, everyone. The tea break is ready, so we'll see all of you back in the room at 10:15 a.m. Thank you.
Hey, we're Zoom. You probably know us for our meetings, but there's a whole lot more to discover about Zoom. You can share a file or chat, make phone calls to over 40 countries, or share your ideas and engage new audiences via our virtual event platform. Zoom helps you express ideas, connect to others, and build toward a future limited only by your imagination. Zoom for you.
My name is Jack, and I run the Center for Immersification at the Singapore Institute of Technology. Our lab was set up to establish a clear mandate to research and develop usable, scalable, and accessible solutions to empower individuals to use and create immersive technologies. We chose the word, the pseudo word immersification to express our intention to capture a wider span of novel user experiences and technological advancements in order to enable immersive applications. So our research outputs are also focused on releasing usable artifacts like plugins and APIs backed by the science that we publish in our papers. Please check out immersification.org in order to find out more about what we do at our lab here. That's all for now, and I hope to see you in the lab soon.
Virtual reality has made its way to public consciousness via games, entertainment, social media, metaverse. When we think of VR, we think of education, medicine, engineering, psychology, science. We think of a way to experience and learn things firsthand. We think of unlimited potential. This is why we created the Voxel Research Lab, a laboratory under the umbrella of Wood University of Technology, a creative space for scientists who want to break new grounds in the domain of mixed reality and create solutions that would benefit all branches of sciences and humanities. Our projects have already assisted psychologists by supporting therapy sessions and future engineers by putting them in the shoes of people they will be designing for. The sky is no longer the limit. At Voxel Lab, we want to unleash the full potential of VR and make it practical, useful, and accessible.
MixRide is a tech startup launched with the support of Korea's NIF ICOPS program. We innovate passengers' experience with all new immersive and entertaining media in all kinds of transportation in their daily lives. We build extended reality platforms for vehicles and other transportation using cutting-edge AI technologies for media generation, such as neural network-based style transfer, bright adaptive content generation.
We are Duke University Intelligent Interactive Internet of Things Lab. We are a part of Duke University that is located in North Carolina, and we are right in the middle of campus, right in the heart of all the action. The lab is led by P.I. Korlatova, Norton Networks Assistant Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering and Computer Science. And the vision is to make next generation augmented reality both reliable and context aware. Our research considers mobile AR devices, but also supporting infrastructures for them, such as edge and cloud computing services and sensors and actuators located in the vicinity of the AR devices. We are presenting two projects here at IEEE ISMAR, one virtually and one in person, and we are actively looking for CE and CS PhD students to join us in our exciting work.
Most people think of NIST as a federal laboratory that only works to improve measurements, but its true central mission is to enable innovation. But how does a measurement agency support innovation? Well, if you know how to measure something, then you can begin to think about how to design it, to build it, and to make it better. And these capabilities really are the essence of technological innovation. Measurements permeate every aspect of our lives. From how we make things, to how we sell things, to how we regulate things. And NIST measurements give us a way to know we can trust this system to be accurate.
Hey, we're Zoom. You probably know us for our meetings, but there's a whole lot more to discover about Zoom. You can share a file or chat, make phone calls to over 40 countries, or share your ideas and engage new audiences via our virtual event platform. Zoom helps you express ideas, connect to others, and build toward a future limited only by your imagination. Zoom for you.
My name is Chek, and I run the Center for Immersification at the Singapore Institute of Technology. Our lab was set up to establish a clear mandate to research and develop usable, scalable, and accessible solutions to empower individuals to use and create immersive technologies. We chose the pseudo word immersification to express our intention to capture a wider span of novel user experiences and technological advancements in order to enable immersive applications. So our research outputs are also focused on releasing usable artifacts like plugins and APIs backed by the science that we publish in our papers. Please check out immersification.org in order to find out more about what we do at our lab here. That's all for now, and I hope to see you in the lab soon.
Virtual reality has made its way to public consciousness via games, entertainment, social media, metaverse. When we think of VR, we think of education, medicine, engineering, psychology, science. We think of a way to experience and learn things firsthand. We think of unlimited potential. This is why we created the Voxel Research Lab, a laboratory under the umbrella of Wood University of Technology, a creative space for scientists who want to break new grounds in the domain of mixed reality and create solutions that would benefit all branches of sciences and humanities. Our projects have already assisted psychologists by supporting therapy sessions and future engineers by putting them in the shoes of people they will be designing for. The sky is no longer the limit. At Voxel Lab, we want to unleash the full potential of VR and make it practical, useful, and accessible.
Mixride is a tech startup launched with the support of Korea's NIF ICOPS program. We innovate passengers' experience with all new immersive and entertaining media in all kinds of transportation in their daily lives. We build extended reality platforms for vehicles and other transportation using cutting-edge AI technologies for media generation, such as neural network-based style transfer, ride adaptive content generation.
We are Duke University Intelligent Interactive Internet of Things Lab. We are a part of Duke University that is located in North Carolina, and we are right in the middle of campus, right in the heart of all the action. The lab is led by P.I. Korla Toda, Northern Networks Assistant Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering and Computer Science. And the vision is to make next generation augmented reality both reliable and context-aware. Our research considers mobile AR devices, but also supporting infrastructures for them, such as edge and cloud computing services and sensors and actuators located in the vicinity of the AR devices. We are presenting two projects here at the IEEE ISMAR, one virtually and one in person, and we are actively looking for CE and CS PhD students to join us in our exciting work.
Most people think of NIST as a federal laboratory that only works to improve measurements, but its true central mission is to enable innovation. But how does a measurement agency support innovation? Well, if you know how to measure something, then you can begin to think about how to design it, to build it, and to make it better. And these capabilities really are the essence of technological innovation. Measurements permeate every aspect of our lives. From how we make things, to how we sell things, to how we regulate things. And NIST measurements give us a way to know we can trust this system to be accurate.
Session with ISMAR. I'm Manuela Chessa from University of Genova, Italy. I'm going to chair this session. Each presenter will have 12 minutes for their presentation and 3 minutes for questions. Of course, it is an hybrid session, so I will also check for questions online on Zoom. Now I can introduce the first speaker. The title of the presentation is Comfortable User Interfaces. Surfaces reduce input error, time, and exertion for tabletop and mid-air user interfaces. The paper will be presented by Yifei Cheng, so you can start.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Awesome. Okay, so hello everyone, my name is Yifei Cheng. I'm currently a first-year PhD student at Carnegie Mellon University. So today I'm here to present my work, Comfortable User Interfaces, Surfaces Reduce Error, Time, and Exertion for Tabletop and Mid-air User Interactions. So this was work I did while I was an intern at the Sensing, Interaction, and Perception Lab at ETH Zurich. I would like to thank my colleagues, Tiffany Luong, Andreas Fender, Paul Strelli, and of course, Christian Holtz. So the main contribution of our work was that we empirically studied the effects of incorporating a physical table surface into virtual reality on user interaction performance, behavior, and subjective experience. Virtual reality promises to transform how we work. It enables flexible workspaces beyond physical constraints, allowing users to place virtual elements anywhere around them. The challenge with using virtual reality for productivity tasks is that its interactions are often impractical for prolonged use. As demonstrated in this video, most virtual reality interactions today are designed to take place in midair. This modality of input is both inaccurate and can quickly become fatiguing. Observing how we work in the physical world, this often takes place around or on top of tabletops. This is because tables enable us to adopt more ergonomic postures that can be sustained for a prolonged period of time. Recent research has therefore proposed incorporating physical surfaces into virtual reality. our work on tap ID and tap type, for instance, we targeted a lot of mid-air interactions onto surfaces so that they could be performed more comfortably. So here are the two works. Commercial devices like the Oculus Quest now also have inbuilt functionality to define physical surfaces for use within the virtual world. So this raises the following question: what exactly are the merits of tabletop-supported interaction over free space interaction? For us, this breaks down more succinctly into two research questions. Firstly, how does the presence of a table in virtual reality affect users' task performance, interaction ergonomics, and preference? Secondly, to what degree do these effects depend on task type, interface distance, and orientation? To answer the aforementioned research questions, we designed an experiment where we asked participants to perform selection and docking tasks in a variety of conditions. Specifically, the conditions we varied included the availability of a table surface, as shown on the left and right columns here. We also investigated two task performance orientations, as illustrated in the blue and yellow. And lastly, we investigated two task performance distances as depicted in the top and bottom columns. To quickly summarize our empirical findings to begin with, participants performed best in the case where they could complete the task by touch on a table surface, followed by mid-air interaction while leaning on a table, and lastly, mid-air interaction without a table. This relation also helped for comfort, exertion, and personal preference. Before diving into the study design, I'm going to provide some context for our research by related work. There's firstly an extensive body of related work on mid-air and surface interactions. Most relevant to our own study are prior works that have compared the two modalities. As seen here are just a few examples, but there's a ton overall. In our own work, we draw inspiration from these prior studies in our experiment design variables, such as task orientation, in the study conducted by Zielasco and colleagues. While prior work also tends to focus on evaluating the benefits of a task-aligned surface in affording passive haptic feedback, we further investigate how surfaces could affect performance in contexts where the task is not aligned with the physical surface itself. And now I'm going to present our experiment design in more detail. We recruited 24 participants to perform two tasks, selection and docking. They performed these two tasks under a set of conditions where we varied the table presence, the task UI orientation, and also the UI distance. So in this video, we demonstrate the selection task. We implemented the ISO standard circular target arrangement following past Fitts law studies. For our docking task, we used an adaptive version of our selection target arrangement where participants had to select, drag, and drop targets according to the display patterns. Participants performed these two tasks with and without a table in front of them, so in the no table condition, they effectively performed the tasks in midair. We also varied the orientation of the task, specifically evaluating task performance in horizontal and vertical conditions. Notice how even with a table available, the vertical condition situates the UI in a position where they have to perform the task in midair above the surface. Lastly, we tested two distances, one near, where the task was placed around a forearm distance away from the participant. We also had the participants perform the task with the UI placed slightly out of reach in our far condition. We used a mixed factorial design with UI orientation evaluated between subjects and the other variables evaluated within subjects. Our apparatus consisted of a tracking space monitored by 6 OptiTrack cameras. We attached 3 rigid bodies for tracking on each arm of the participant, monitoring wrist, elbow, and shoulder pose. We used a single marker to identify the position of the participant's right index finger, which they used to perform the task. And participants performed the task in a virtual reality environment with an abstract body representation. To evaluate the effects of our set of variables, we collected performance metrics. Specifically, in the selection task, we captured selection time, errors, and offsets. In the docking task, we captured docking time and offset, as well as drop count. We asked participants to self-report their comfort, agency, exertion, and strain via Likert scales. And lastly, we monitored participants' upper arm, lower arm and wrist movements with our motion capture setup. And now moving on to our results. For the selection task, the presence of a table significantly decreased the selection offset in the horizontal condition, meaning that it increased performance accuracy. For the docking task, the presence of a table significantly decreased the docking offset in both the horizontal and vertical conditions. Again, we see an increase in performance accuracy. And for the docking task again, in the horizontal condition, the presence of the table further increased docking speed. So not only were participants able to perform the task more accurately, they did so in a shorter period of time. Overall, we observed performance benefits in both horizontal and vertical conditions with the presence of a table. We attribute benefits observed in the horizontal and table condition to how the surface affords passive haptic feedback. We attribute benefits observed in the vertical and table condition to how the table could serve as a source of stability and as a haptic reference point. From the participants' self-reported metrics, we observed that the presence of a table reduced physical exertion and strain while increasing agency and comfort in the horizontal condition. And in the vertical condition, the presence of a table reduced physical exertion and specifically shoulder strain while increasing comfort. Lastly, examining our motion data, for the selection task, the presence of a table reduced lower arm movements in the horizontal condition and upper arm movements in the vertical condition. In the docking task, the presence of a table reduced upper arm movement while increasing wrist movement. Generally, we observed reduced movements in both horizontal and vertical conditions, which could partially explain some of the self-reported metrics, such as the increased comfort and reported lowered strain. In the horizontal and table conditions, we attribute the observed effects to participants' ability to slide their forearm and wrist against the table. And in the vertical and table conditions, we attribute the observed effects to participants' ability to anchor their elbow on the table during task performance. So in summary, the presence of tables in virtual reality scenarios improves agency, comfort, and task performance while decreasing physical exertion. Notably, these effects apply even when the surface does not provide passive haptic feedback, such as when the virtual task is not aligned with the physical surface. We believe that these are potential indicators for that the incorporation of physical tabletops in virtual reality may therefore support tasks of longer durations. Our study is, of course, not without limitations, and there's certainly a lot of future work to be done. Firstly, we only captured motion by our OptiTrack system. We believe that capturing explicit contact with the table surface could also yield further insight. Secondly, we can extend upon the range of evaluated interactions, for example, varying target size, interaction scale, accuracy requirements, and also the task dimensionality. Lastly, we're currently working on operationalizing these findings to support opportunistic co-opting of table surfaces in virtual reality applications. So this is a direction of research that I'm personally very excited about. We're particularly excited about how ergonomic considerations and surface affordances could be incorporated into computational interaction models for virtual reality and mixed reality interfaces. So if there is one takeaway from this study, it is embedded in our subtitle: surfaces reduce error, time, and exertion for tabletop emitter interactions. And thanks again for listening. I'm Yifei Cheng, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions for the presenter?
Hi, I'm Gudrun Klinker from TU Munich. Very nice talk, very interesting experiment. You talk about near and far, and that gives me the idea to worry about subject size, arm's length. And so did you take that into consideration with the distribution of test persons you had? And what about the difference in height? You are looking only at that distance, not that one.
Right, so we calibrated the placement of the UI based on the arm length of the participant themselves. So I think that was how we tried to address this potential confound when it comes to the task itself. Thank you for your question. I hope it answers it as well.
So hello, I'm Jens Grubert from Coburg University, and thanks again for your talk. So you mentioned that your findings will support that those tabletops will support extended interactions or long-term interactions, and I was wondering, do you actually have any plans to specifically study these extended and long-term interactions? Because I guess you use this ISO standard pointing task, which of course can be vary, but it's not like an hour-long task, right? So can you comment on if and how you would design an experiment that actually goes over an extended period of time? Thank you so much.
Thanks for the lovely question. So for this experiment itself, that was part of the consideration. So when picking a task length, we wanted to pick a task length for the ISO standard task that was at once somewhat strenuous, but also not like completely exhausting, so we don't have any ceiling effects as a result. So here we picked around 3 minutes, and I think if you try to keep your arm up for 3 minutes, you'll very quickly realize, I guess this is the proverbial gorilla arm effect, where like this effect kicks in pretty quickly. So that was kind of part of the angle with this study, where we picked kind of a prolonged duration to begin with, even with the ISO standard task, to see if there was some benefit here. I think this direction of using VR for prolonged tasks, I think there's a paper in an upcoming session that does a week-long study. I think definitely more longitudinal studies will have to take place in order to really evaluate what are the factors at play and also how we can potentially take this forward. I think personally, there is some work that I've been doing that focuses on enabling interactions in different physical environments that take advantage of ergonomics. I'm also excited about doing longer evaluations with this and seeing if our hypotheses still hold within these extended period of time. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
I think that there is time for a very last question.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I'm Miriam Frostman from Amsterdam. I thought it was really interesting. It reminded me of an experiment we did in Amsterdam, a focus group, where you were standing in a bar in Amsterdam in VR. And in VR, the tabletop or the bar that you were standing on was represented as well. You probably mentioned it, but just to be clear, was the tabletop in your VR experiment represented as well? So did people see the tabletop?
Yes, they did.
Yes, they did. Okay, yes, thank you. Just to be sure, thanks.
Okay, we can thank the speaker. We can thank Yifei Chang.
Thank you so much.
Okay, the next speaker is Difeng Yu, so you can, Since the second speaker is not available, so we can go directly to the planned third presentation. Difeng Yu will present blending own body and mid-air interaction in virtual reality.
My slides to show up.
Oh, okay.
All right.
We see your slides, so you can start.
All right, thanks for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. This is Stephen. I'm currently a final year PhD student at the University of Melbourne. So today I'm going to present our work, blending on-body and media interaction in virtual reality systems. So I would like to thank my co-authors, Kyushi, Tillman, Eduardo, and George. So many of us will probably agree that media interaction through hand movements and gestures is one of the most common forms of interaction in current VR systems. They are natural, straightforward, and hand movements and gestures may be particularly suitable for 3D interaction because of their 6 degrees of freedom input. However, previous literature has also criticized, as also mentioned by the previous talk by Yifan, they are imprecise and cumbersome, and they often lacking haptic feedback. So in order to improve the usability and the efficiency of such media interaction techniques, previous work has used enhancement techniques. For example, they scale up and down the virtual movements of the object in the virtual space by changing its CD ratio in order to make the movement faster or more precise. And they also allow like 1 degree of freedom translation so that hopefully our control in that space can be more precise. And previous work has also investigated new gestures like this relaxed arm down gesture to lessen the cumbersomeness of this media interaction. Probably more relevant to our work is by using some complementary modalities, such as a previous work used the gaze-based input to help with the media input, so that hopefully it will be able to speed up the lateral transformation and improve its usability. And also the talk by Yifan also mentioned that they use the tabletop to augment the user's gesture and input. So our work actually focuses on integrated on-body interfaces, which try to leverage the human body surface as an input and output platform in order to enhance and augment the existing VR workflow based on media interaction. So we sort of take this multi-modal approach to try to improve its usability. So why do we choose on-body interfaces? Because they are always available when we are traveling around the virtual environment. Our virtual body always follows us, so they are always available for interaction. They also allow easy eyes-free targeting. You can easily locate your body part without even looking at them. The body surfaces can also provide additional tactile feedback and potentially can act as a support for our on-body gestures, so maybe that they are more precise in that case. So actually, we can identify a lot of benefits of integrating the on-body interface into our existing media workflow. So we cannot fully replace our media interaction with on-body input because our body surfaces are mostly flat. So they normally lack the support for direct 3D interaction, unlike the media gestures. So that's why we want to sort of blend the on-body and media interfaces together so that we can achieve better 3D interaction. So in order to explore that design space, we sort of come up with the 2 design dimensions. One is the input dimension, and another one is the output dimension. So for the input dimension, our body contact information, including the touches, gestures, and deformation, can all be used as an input. Our media information, including the hand translation, rotation, and relation between the 2 hands, can also be used as the input information. Another possibility is that we try to combine the on-body and media input together. So for example, one of our hands perform the on-body gesture and the other hand can perform the media gesture, so that these sort of 2 modalities sort of get combined in this case. We also have our output dimension. We can attach our virtual content to our on-body space or place them in the media space. So with all of these little elements inside of this input and output dimension, we can sort of draw different mappings to see how we can actually allow interaction between the input and output, and by using the 2 modalities. So we actually categorize how previous literature actually falls into this design space, and we identify 3 design opportunities. The first one, we want to try to combine the on-body and media input together, considering the bimanual input property of the hands. So different hands can perform different gestures. The second opportunity is to enable the manipulation of on-body content with the media input. Basically, the previous work has looked into how to use media input to interact with body content in our arm or with our hands, but we want to sort of extend to other body parts like torso, legs. We can all display this virtual content on different body parts, and all they can be interacted with the media interaction. And we also want to enable the content transfer between the two interfaces. So because two of the interfaces have their unique display properties. For example, for the media input, we sort of have a large display space for displaying all of this virtual content, while for on-body space, we carry all of this virtual content with us while traveling around the virtual world. So that's an additional benefit of on-body interaction. So in order to explore each of the design opportunities, we sort of dig deeper into like how to design techniques based on these design opportunities. So the first one is the on-body and media input. We try to combine both of them in this case. So we first identified two types of on-body gestures. One is thumb on finger gesture. The other is finger on arm gestures. So basically, we consider how these two gestures can be distributed across our two hands. And we derive 4 design patterns. These design patterns are templates that allow us to derive interaction techniques for selection, manipulation, navigation, and system control. So with our first design pattern, we use single hand media input plus the thumb on finger gesture. So media input is sort of controlling the media movements of the object inside of the space, and then we can quickly tapping our different segments of the fingers to make the adjustments of different modes. For example, we can adjust the CD ratio, we can separate the degree of freedom, so we only allow either transformation or rotation to happen at the same time. And we also allow the scaling by pressing different segments of the finger. And for the second design paradigm, we think a design pattern, we try to combine a single hand media input in one hand and also the thumb on finger gesture of the other hand to try to quickly change the drawing color. For example, in this case, I'm trying to draw something inside a virtual space. And I can quickly change the drawing color by use the thumb on finger gesture on the other hand without disturbing the main workflow of my primary hand. Right? So we don't have to use the mode switching technique for using my primary hand, which is trying to drawing. At the same time, we can quickly change the drawing color. And for the third paradigm, we try to consider the both relation between the two hands in order to make more complex interaction. For example, by combining different thumb on finger gestures, we can make the object to translate towards an object or around an object. Right? All of these are using the relationship between the two hands and quickly switch the mode by using the thumb on finger gestures. With the fourth design pattern, we try to use the media input plus the finger on arm gesture, which is another gesture that we identify for on-body input. And in this case, I'm trying to get an occluded target by just sliding on my finger and by using my media pointing gestures to point at the desired direction. So for this one, I'm changing the size of the group selection cursor by just sliding on my arm and by using the media interaction of one hand to identify the location of the transformation. And I can also change the distance of the teleportation, as well as translating an object along 1 degree of freedom. So hopefully that can make the interaction more precise because less of the degree of freedom is controlled. All right, so this is for the first design opportunity, and then we try to explore the second design opportunity, which is try to use the media input to interact with on-body content. In this case, you can see I'm trying to manipulate a mini-map attached on the user's belly to try to teleport to different places. So this is sort of acting as the remote manipulation by using the media gesture on our on-body interfaces. The mini-map is attached to the user's body. And for the last design opportunity, we want to enable the content transfer between the two interfaces. In this case, I can sort of put the object in a media space to my body, and then I can retrieve them later by performing the media gestures, by looking at my feet, and then try to recreate them in a 3D virtual space. So this sort of leveraged the unique property of the both displays so that we can travel around the environment without losing some of the content that we've saved in the body. All right, so this is sort of like the ideal scenario that how we can sort of design the interaction techniques. We actually implement all of them and in the Oculus Quest 2 system. And based on this design interaction techniques, we want to try to explore the design, immediate design issues with all of these interactions based on on-body and media interaction together so that we conduct expert evaluation study. Our study results shows that the intended function that we mentioned are sort of achievable by all of the users, and they are relatively easy to learn. And at the same time, we also identify some problems we need to consider when combining both of the interfaces. For example, we find that user will have limited cognitive bandwidth to deal with both of the inputs. For example, we find that they only perform the gestures serially, sequentially, rather than performing both of the gesture at the same time. So because they have limited bandwidth in dealing with both of the information. So this sort of indicates some of the design that we need to consider in the future. We also find they can miss visual feedback that we provided on body when focusing on manipulating object in the virtual space. So in this case, when they are focusing on the media content, and they try to do some like eyes-free targeting on the on-body space, then they probably will miss the visual feedback because of the field of view. So that we will suggest that presenting all of this feedback, on-body feedback within the user's attention region so that they can be more aware about their on-body input event. So we also sort of discussed the comfortable on-body input and output region, which you can find more in our paper. All right, so future work. So in this work, we actually conducted a very qualitative study where we didn't measure the task completion time because we use a Oculus Quest 2 tracking system to track our on-body surfaces, and also we use like inverse kinematic to approximate how the lower limbs will display in the virtual space. So in this case, if we are trying to like move it for future work, we suggest that we can use the higher tracking system to make it like an accurate tracking so that we can do performance comparison between different techniques. And then possibly these interaction techniques can be particularly designed for other application scenarios like immersive analytics. So overall, we will envision that the design space inspiring new techniques in a variety of 3D interaction scenarios in VR. Thanks.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there questions? Yes, there is one.
Hi, thank you for the nice talk. It's so cool. Is it on a Quest 2?
Quest 2.
Do you plan to put this online? I would love to try it with my students as well.
Yeah. We are trying to post that link online after this talk, and then hopefully
we have the APK, yeah.
So we actually build up the application. It's like for Android. So because Oculus Quest 2 use like Android application, so that I think you can directly import into.
So we have the APK and side loaded. Brilliant, thank you.
Cool.
Other questions? Yes?
Hello, Mark Satkowski, Interactive Media Lab Dresden. Thank you for the nice talk. I wondered, you presented on-body visualizations, but it was more like attached to the body and not really shaped by the body form itself. So did you explore in that direction as well, or what are your thoughts about fitting it to a body itself?
So yes, we actually try to also design some techniques that are sort of attached to the body surfaces. For example, in one of the demonstration, I'm trying to show it here. So as you can see, some of the icons are attached to our finger so that you can directly manipulate them in some of the cases. And for the parts that are attached to the like belly, it's more, like you said, it's like more not attached to the body, but it's just anchored towards the body. It's not like directly attached to the body. So that we think our on-body interfaces, as we imagine, that we want to actually enable the 3D display of our on-body interaction, so that we sort of extend the space a little bit by putting some of the content into our media space, so that they can have more like display property, rather than if it is like purely attached to our body surfaces, it will be like mostly 2D, right? So that's why we sort of also want to extend in that direction, so that we want to make them 3D in this case. So I think there is a lot of work related to like body anchored interfaces. For example, you can enter your different icons around your body, and then when you move your body, your icon also follows you. I think the difference between that one and us is more like our techniques are more body parts anchored, so that for different body parts, the interfaces should follow the movements of different body parts rather than just anchored towards a particular position. I don't know if that answers your question. Thanks.
Thank you again for your presentation, Difang, and for the questions. Oh, there is one very last question.
Yep.
Yes.
Hello, thank you for a nice talk.
Thank you.
And I want to question about your implementation detail. How did you trigger the input, or was it just finger position, or did you use the IMU or something? That's my question. Thank you.
So our implementation is more on the finger position. So for example, for enabling the thumb on finger gestures, we sort of measure the finger position relative to the other finger position, so that we measure the distance between the two. And if it is smaller than a certain threshold, it will get triggered. So that's our implementation. And I know that the tracking based on the Oculus Quest 2 is not always accurate. That's why we sort of conduct the expert evaluation, so that they will be able to adjust their hand positions, and we can be able to demonstrate all of the techniques work in real time. Thanks.
Thank you. We can move to the next presentation. That is an online presentation.
This presentation provides a demonstration of a new pipeline for passive haptic feedback. This pipeline engages the user's haptic senses and improves the sense of presence in virtual reality applications. Let's get started. What is presence? Presence is the sense of being there in the virtual environment. In social VR, presence is the sense of being there together with others. It includes spatial presence, or whether the virtual environment matches reality. It includes self-embodiment, or whether the virtual avatar feels like the user's body. It also includes the physical senses, such as sight, sound, and touch. Presence also includes social interaction, or whether the user feels like others are there together with them. Social presence can be enhanced by showing natural movements to remote users. Passive haptic feedback provides the most natural physical interaction possible, using the hands to pick up real objects instead of interacting through controllers. This work aims to enhance presence in VR by engaging the user's haptic senses. We created a pipeline, which we call Cards VR, for passive haptic feedback using a deck of 52 playing cards. Players interact with physical cards by picking them up, holding them, playing them, or moving them with one-to-one correlation between the physical and virtual environments. This work provides several key contributions. This pipeline is the first application of passive haptic feedback we are aware of that allows 2 or more remote players to play a game of cards together. This pipeline can track hundreds of objects with a high frame rate. It achieves this due to the simplicity of the pipeline, which I will cover later. We also performed a user study to evaluate the impact of passive haptic feedback on the sense of presence with positive results. Our pipeline uses flat fiducial markers to keep track of initial card locations and correct static objects in the environment. This includes the virtual table height for improved spatial presence. After the game begins, we turn off the tracking system and instead use the VR headset's built-in hand tracking to facilitate card movement. This avoids the added complexity and latency of implementing a Kalman filter to reduce tracking jitter, which can distract the user and reduce their sense of presence. An external camera was installed on the VR headset to track card locations. Our implementation uses a custom iOS app and the Photon Network's real-time engine to pass sparse marker data to the headset over the internet. A symbol library consisting of 3,000 Uruko markers was used to represent 52 playing cards, each with 28 symbols per side. We needed at least 2,912 symbols to represent a complete deck of cards. Marker 3D reconstruction was performed using OpenCV's infinitesimal plane-based pose estimation, which requires markers consisting of 4 sides and was found to have the least jitter. Although the markers are initially 3D reconstructed at the camera far plane, we correct for depth by factoring in each marker's physical size. The size of the markers are unique and known beforehand. A lookup table provides an offset vector between the marker center and the corresponding card center locations. It is possible to reconstruct a card from imaging a single marker, but we average the translation and rotation vectors of the detected cards together to reduce errors. Continuous tracking was attempted, but it suffered from positional and rotational jitter that we found to be distracting and would have degraded the user's experience. Prior work by Batmaz in 2019 showed that rotational jitter greater than half a degree degrades the user's throughput and increases user error in VR. However, this was not the case for static objects. Coley in 2010 showed that perfect registration of real and virtual objects are not required to maintain a high level of presence. Our pipeline overcomes this limitation by turning off tracking once gameplay begins and instead relying on other, low jitter systems such as the headset's built-in hand tracking to move objects. This slide shows several examples of jitter we encountered using continuous tracking. Examples of positional jitter and a misidentified marker are shown in the top figure. Positional jitter is shown by the variation in the green normal vector, which we captured over a period of 1 second. The misidentified marker ID generates a false card. The bottom image shows the rotational jitter also captured over 1 second. Here the captured markers are shown superimposed on the camera far plane. Our tracker assumes that objects are stationary until a player interacts with them. Movement of passive haptic objects is accomplished using the Oculus Quest 2's built-in hand tracking and game mechanics. Cards start in a pile, which is located by the tracking system before gameplay begins. This pile location remains static throughout the game. Cards are then interacted with using the Quest 2's hand tracking system. Cards transition state when the user's hand intersects a pile, which is represented by the gray collision boxes in the top right figure. The state machine controlling each card is shown in the bottom right figure. The picked up card attaches to a fixed anchor point on the user's virtual hand. This attachment is delayed by 2 seconds, which was adjusted during development until multiple participants in our pilot study felt comfortable picking up a card with this delay. However, during our study, some players were slow to pick up cards and could be confused by the card prematurely attaching to their hand. Once the player intersects their hand with another pile, the card leaves their hand and is played. Remotely controlled cards constantly update their position and attach to piles after being played by an opponent. We developed our user study to evaluate presence with and without using passive haptic objects. Here, users play a game of war against each other, which is a game that almost everyone knows and is simple. We chose this card playing scenario to reduce the learning curve and complexity that could otherwise bias our study results. The study participants were divided into 2 groups. One group was provided with physical cards serving as passive haptic objects. This group had 1-to-1 correlation between movable objects in the physical and virtual environments. The control group did not use physical cards and instead relied on game mechanics and hand tracking to move virtual objects only. Our survey consisted of 17 standard questions from Whitmer and Singer's Presence Questionnaire. 23 participants took part in the survey. The results show a significant improvement in 3 measures of presence when using passive haptic feedback. On the 1 to 7 Likert scale, we found a 9/10 improvement in haptics and a 7/10 improvement in realism and the possibility to act. The box chart on the right shows the improvement in these standard measures of presence. Haptics in particular showed the best improvement because users can feel objects they are interacting with using their hands. The haptic interaction is also realistic and mimics how users would play cards outside of VR. Improvements in the possibility to act are due to the interface being more controllable and intuitive, than relying on hand tracking and game mechanics alone to move objects in the virtual space. Our study also included a free-form questionnaire where users could write about their experience. We provided the questionnaire after users completed the survey to avoid biasing the results. This questionnaire consisted of 10 prompts. The responses were categorized to identify themes common across multiple users. These themes were identified as gameplay experience, virtual and physical interplay, natural and easy hand interaction, and the sense of presence with others. Our thematic analysis provides an important discovery that social presence can be improved by handling passive haptic objects. Manipulating passive haptic objects promotes natural object interactions that would not take place using any other method. This happens because interactions take place with real objects that players move using their hands. This movement is different than what a player would do using VR controllers, for example. These natural movements can provoke an emotional response due to perceived remote body language. One player noted that they sensed enthusiasm, hesitation, and excitement from remote players they were interacting with. Players also felt anchored in the virtual environment due to handling physical objects. This provided an intuitive interface that gave a sense of focus, self-control, and ease. All of these reasons indicate why users reported an increased sense of presence during the survey. Users also reported several factors that reduced their sense of presence. Game mechanics such as the use of collision boxes and fixed pile locations limited the user's sense of realism. Users also expressed an expectation for continuous tracking, which would have allowed players to hold more than one card at a time. Our static tracking approach, which fixes the location of tracked objects once gameplay begins, relies on the position of these objects remaining constant during the game. This includes the card pile locations. Both of these factors made several users feel the experience was less real. Continuous tracking would have allowed users to hold multiple cards at the same time with non-fixed positions in the hand, but tracking jitter would have degraded the user's sense of realism. Here I cover several improvements and extensions that could be made to this pipeline. Some form of object tracking during gameplay is necessary to avoid relying on game mechanics to perform actions, which limit what the user can do. This includes holding multiple cards at the same time. Markers were arranged on the cards with occlusion in mind. It was assumed that the smaller markers around the card perimeter would be closer to the camera and more discernible when held in the user's hands. Although our final implementation did not include continuous tracking, a hybrid tracking system that periodically corrects the position and rotation of objects while still relying on hand tracking for fine motions may still be possible. The pipeline can also be extended to render non-card-based objects such as 3D virtual game figures, haptic board games, and for document collaboration. Current industry practices rarely engage the haptic sense, and I believe many VR applications could benefit from adding passive haptic objects to their user experiences. To summarize, this work demonstrates a pipeline for controlling passive haptic objects with a high degree of presence. We showed that users benefited from passive haptic feedback in 3 standard measures of presence, including the possibility to act, realism, and haptics. Passive haptic feedback anchors users within the virtual environment, improves the user's sense of control, and enhances social interactions. Finally, I'd like to show a video demo. Here, 2 players are picking up cards, placing them, and progressing through their game of war together. You can see the local player is resting his arm on the table, which corresponds to a real physical table. The card pile location corresponds with real objects the user is actually picking up in real life.
3, 1.
Thank you for your time, and I hope you consider adding passive haptic objects in your next VR application. If there are any questions, I can entertain them now. Thank you.
Thanks to Andrew for the presentation. Andrew is online, so if there are questions, you can ask directly to Andrew, who can answer you. Are there questions? In the meantime, I have a question for Andrew. about your work and the future work that you have presented. You have mentioned, let me say, flat objects. So you haven't mentioned the possibility of having the same kind of haptic feedback and the same pipeline for more complex 3D objects. Can you elaborate on this? Can you?
I think the limitation is the fiducial markers that I'm using to do the tracking. Because they're flat markers, they'd have to be attached to, like, let's say, a more complex 3D object. But if you have it as a flat object, it can be flush against the surface, and I think it would work better.
Oh, yes, I understood that the markers that you are using are flat, but you can extend. I think that it's quite easy to extend to 3D objects. Other questions? Okay, if there are not other questions, I think that we can thank Andrew again. Now we have the fifth presentation, investigating input modality and task geometry on precision first 3D drawing in virtual reality. Is there the presenter of this paper?
Yeah. So I'm here actually online.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm laughing since they told me that it should be in person, so I'm a little bit scared about the voice. Okay, so I'm asking the technical guys how I have to proceed. Chen Chen is going to present his paper online. So I think that the presentation should appear, and I.
So should I present or should you guys play the video playback though?
I don't have the answer, but Okay, to Shenshan, we are ready. So we see your slides on Zoom, and I think that in a few seconds we will see them. Okay, we will see your slides also for the in-presence audience. So Shenshan, you can start.
Cool. Thank you so much. So hello, I'm Chen. So I'm actually from the University of California, San Diego. So today we are going to talk about our journey to understand how input modality and task geometry could affect the precision-first 3D drawing in virtual reality. So this is a collaborative work with University of California, Los Angeles. So as we all know, the capabilities of drawing in 3D unconstrained immersive virtual environment is a key primitive to unlock a wide variety of VR-based applications. So for example, the designers could use such 3D drawing capabilities to effectively externalize and communicate their ideas. So such 3D drawing capability is also important in healthcare. So for example, another of our work presenting in this year's ISMAR demonstrate how to bring contour delineation process of radiotherapy treatment into VR. So if you are interested, feel free to join my talk in a modeling session later at 12:30. So therefore, it is important to understand humans' 3D drawing ability in virtual reality. So to address this, many prior research has focused on evaluating the performance of precision-first 3D drawing, which refers to a drawing process when precision is prioritized. So for example, the existing work has focused on evaluating the drawing performance of 1D, such as a line, and 2D, such as a planar circle in VR. Some works also focus on the drawing performance of what we call combined 2D tasks, such as a cube. Few other works also focus on the 2.5D tasks, such as a planar circle projected on a curved surface. However, there is still a lack of understanding of the human's drawing performance of the true 3D curve, which will only be described by 3 orthonormal bases. So in our work, we focus on evaluating participants' drawing performance with a target tracing experiment of a 3D helical curve, which has not yet been evaluated in the prior works. Even though it is one of the simplest continuous curve with constant curvature and slopes. And it has also been widely used in many existing computer-aided design tools. Mathematically speaking, a 3D helical curve could be described by a parametric equation with respect to a constant curvature and slopes. So with this observation, we therefore designed a within-subject experiment with 12 participants. We considered 4 independent categorical variables, including orientation, curvature, slopes, and input methods. So for orientations, we considered 3 possibilities, including the up-down, the left-right, and also forward-backward. We also considered 3 possibilities for curvature and slopes, respectively. Theoretically speaking, the larger slope is, the more stretched the helical curve will be, and the circle of the projections on the XY plane will have larger radius for the smaller curvature. Then, we also considered 4 input methods, including using a commercially available VR pen and VR controller, the bare hand pointing, and also hand pinch. We then prototype our testbed on HTC Vive for controller and pen, as well as Oculus Quest 2 for the bare hand inputs, due to the merits of hand tracking performance on Oculus Quest 2. We then set up the experimental environment in a typical office room with 2 base stations for tracking purposes. During the study, participants will first complete the pre-study questionnaire, followed by the designated drawing tasks and the post-study experience evaluations. While comparing the tasks with each input methods, breaks were intentionally added to minimize the impact of drawing fatigues. After putting on the headset, participants could complete the designated target tracing tasks, whose order has been also counterbalanced. So how do we evaluate the drawing performance quantitatively? So first, we consider the mean overall deviation, which is a way to measure the drawing precision in spatial domain. And mathematically speaking, the mean overall deviation is simply the average of Euclidean distance between each sample stroke to the target trace. So obviously, a good drawing performance will result in a smaller mean overall deviation. We also considered what we call the number of local maxima of the stroke deviation, or NOM in short, in spatial domain, which has also been used in the prior research. Essentially, this quantitative value describes how frequently the participants attempt to correct the instantaneous drawing errors. We finally also look at the mean drawing speed in temporal domain, which is the average ratio of the Euclidean distance between two consecutive strokes and their time differences. The first part of our evaluation focused on the main effect. While looking at the full input method, it is clear that using the VR pen could generate highest precision, which might be caused by the higher frequency of error correction attempts. More interestingly, while participants were instructed to perform the precision-first 3D drawing, they attempted to draw slightly slower while using the VR pen. When it comes to curvature, we found that larger curvature could actually generate higher precision, although such geometry characteristics might also slow down the drawing process. While slope does not necessarily have impacts on the drawing precision and speeds, a smaller slope could actually slightly increase the number of local maxima of arrows. And finally, our study also demonstrates a higher precision for forward-backward and left-right orientations. While gathered plenty of insights from the analysis of interaction effects, we would love to highlight a few exciting findings. First, we found that while being compared to the controller, the VR pen could generate more precise drawings, but only at the large curvature tasks. In addition to that, the VR pen demonstrated a more significant precision drawing merits while being compared to the controller for left and right orientations. Finally, we also analyzed the impact from 3 intermediate variables, including the stroke shoulder distance, the absolute instantaneous drawing speed, and drawing precisions. Notably, while the participants were instructed to conduct the precision-first 3D drawing, it is challenging to control and regulate such variables to a desired value. So as you can see here, we show the correlation of each causal links. So in particular, with VR pen, which is the input tool that can potentially achieve the highest precision, the minimal error will achieved when the stroke shoulder distance is around like 60% of the forearm length, and when the drawing speed is around 2 centimeters per second. While discussing with participants during post-study semi-structured interview, we generate 5 findings. First, while using the VR pen could be more precise, participants think it also yields higher level of fatigue. Second of all, participants also believe that while using hand input could decrease the level of fatigue, the potential reason can vary among the pinch and pointing gestures. Then, the occlusion and occasional poor hand tracking are also highlighted as another reason for decreasing the level of confidence. Fourthly, the median of curvature and slope was suggested to yield the best delineation experience. And finally, participants also emphasized several opinions regarding the interaction effects between curvature and orientations. Through our qualitative and quantitative findings, we generated our design recommendations in terms of 2 aspects. The first type of recommendation focus on the pre-session design stage, which refers to strategies that could be adopted before each drawing session. For example, designers could use a VR pen as a tool for precision for 3D drawing. And the issue of occlusion might be one of the key aspects for increasing the drawing accuracies. The second types of design recommendation focus on in-session stage, which refers to a strategy that could be integrated during each drawing session. For example, the information of fatigue, drawing speed, stroke shoulder distance, and hand tracking accuracies could be visualized in real time to help users better regulate the drawing postures. Potential feedbacks could also include the scale and orientation, which demonstrated by our finding have impact on the drawing precisions. As a brief conclusion, we would love to highlight our findings from 3 aspects. First, VR pen and controller lead to, on average, a nearly 30% of precision gain. And in particular, VR pen itself yield nearly 15% of more precision gain than the controller. In addition to that, the large curvature for backward and left-right orientation allows a higher precision for 3D drawing. Finally, we wish our work will benefit future research aiming to create a useful toolbox for precision for 3D drawing and beyond. Thank you so much for your time, and please refer to our paper for more details. And finally, I would love to discuss any questions.
Thank you, Shenshan, for your presentation. Are there questions from the audience?
Hello. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was a lovely study. I'm just wondering if you have any intuition behind some of the results you've received. So, like, it's quite impressive that we found this precision gain when you were using these controllers and VR pens. I'm wondering if you had any thoughts about, like, perhaps why that might have been observed from your study.
Yeah, thank you so much. So this is actually a great question. So our paper is really focused on a mixture of quantitative or qualitative study. So to your question, the answer will be yes. So while after conducting the measurement with like these 12 participants, we actually conducted a bunch of semi-structured interview to basically understanding the potential reason behind this. Due to a limited of time for this presentation, it's really hard to go into each of them, honestly speaking. So, but the answer is yes. So we do. So we talk to participants to show them our measurement results, and then ask them to extrapolate on what's going on while measuring their drawing performance. Yeah, I hope that is helpful.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yes. Can you say something about the handedness of the participants in the study? Because I noticed you mentioned you were drawing the curves from left to right. And if they were a mixture of both left-handed and right-handed people, did you try to determine if there was a difference in performance between them?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So unfortunately, whatever you point out is actually a big limitation of this work. I have to say in this way, because all the participants we recruited are right-handed, actually. So we did not really consider any participant who was using their left hand for all these kind of tasks. So we have included this part in the final limitation sessions, actually. So short answer, so in this work per se, we only consider the right-handed participants.
Did you do any pilots in which you looked at front to back versus back to front?
So during the study, we basically asked participants to draw in the way they preferred, actually. But before every session, they are free with, they are free to basically do some practices. So this process will just take around like 10 minutes each. I would say no, like 5 to 10 minutes. Yes, to just get used to the different condition and find the posture and gesture they prefer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shen. So I can. Are there other questions? No. I think that I can introduce the next speaker. Next speaker will be Xiu Quan Liu, and the title of the presentation is In-Place Gestures Classification via Long-Term Memory Augmented Network.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Xue Quanlu. I'm from Deakin University, Australia. So today, my presentation is our work regarding the in-place gestures recognition using the neural networks. Okay. So what is the virtual locomotion? Essentially, we can see this in many video games, actually. So which means users, they control their viewpoint and intuitively move in the three-dimensional virtual environment. So in-place gesture-based virtual locomotion methods, these kind of techniques, such as arm swing or foot stabbing, allows the user to navigate the virtual environment with in-place gestures. So which provides the kinesthetic feedback similar to the real walking, and also enhance the immersion and also the naturalness. But typically, the challenges is how to recognize this kind of gestures, these patterns with low latency and also with a higher accuracy. So this is just like a framework. So how we can use this kind of gesture recognition module in this kind of the video games. Essentially, essentially, the second part is the gesture recognition module, and we mainly focus on this. So first of all, we need to give a very short-term input, and then after the module, we need to detect or recognize so which kind of gestures it is, and then to trigger the corresponding gesture. Okay. So here are some previous works, some background. For example, Hythen, they proposed the linear acceleration of head-mounted display. This using the XYZ coordinates of the HMD as input and fed it into a CNN convolutional neural network to recognize whether the user is standing or walking in place. So essentially, it's two types. And she and their work essentially to collect the pressure using the sensors on insoles and also to recognize 7 types of foot patterns. Okay. So Zhao and their work, they essentially to regard or treat several consecutive frames as a point cloud and to construct the point cloud data as input. For example, 7 frames or 10 frames, this kind of thing. And it can be viewed as a point cloud, but point cloud is number of points is typically relatively few. Okay. And they also utilize the domain adaptation to address or mitigate the interperson variations. So essentially, for example, it's only 18 points. So this is one major drawback for this kind of methods. Okay. So in previous works, to achieve the real-time experience, we have to use the short-term sensor sequence data as input. And the point cloud format just directly makes the points of all frames and hiding the features of the temporal dimension. Okay. So what do we do to address this kind of research problems? For example, the short-term sequence and also the number of points is too limited in the point cloud as input. So what do we think? Essentially, we treat the gesture-based virtual locomotion task as a real-time skeleton-based action recognition task. So what do? We connect the head joint with 2 leg joints. So as you can see, so this is track data using the HMD and also 2 trackers on the legs, the right and the left legs. Okay, so only 3 points. But compared to the point cloud data, it is a skeleton format, and the skeleton can be represented as a spatial temporal graph. Okay, and the joints can compose the graph nodes. Okay, the intra-body edges between the body joints in each frame contain the edge features, including the angles, the lines, and also the interframe edges connect the same joints between consecutive frames. Okay. So we manually design the features such as the motion velocity, the edge lines, edge angle, before inputting the raw skeleton coordinate features to the network. Okay. So our motivation, essentially, as we can imagine, the long-term gesture sequence, this kind of sequence, they can provide more spatial temporal information. And typically, the previous work, they have to take the short-term because the long-term sequence samples leads to a system latency, so that the real-time performance cannot be or can hardly be achieved. Okay. But typically, the long-term sequence can include multiple short-term sequences, and which means, in the other words, the short-term sequence is semantically relevant or related to the long-term sequence. Okay. So what do we do? Essentially, we want to define or construct a memory bank so that once we have the short-term sequence, and we can recall the corresponding long-term sequence features automatically. Okay, so this is the key idea in this work. So here's a demo regarding how we collect the data. I can play a few seconds. So we use a head-mounted display and 2 valve trackers and build a larger scale data set. We collect the position and also the rotation of the trackers on body again. Our methodology. Okay, so as you can see, we have the skeleton-based the gesture sequences, the short-term and also the long-term. Input them into 2 encoders, the short-term encoder and also the long-term encoder, respectively. Okay, to achieve the representations. So we have a memory bank. Essentially, we want to include the long-term features into this memory bank, and we directly compute the similarity between the short-term feature and also the long-term feature in the bank. Okay, so this is through the similarity matching. Essentially, it's a dot product operation, and we get this addressing vector. Okay, the addressing vector will be multiplied or dot product with this matrix again to achieve the final record feature. Okay, so finally, the record feature, FREC record feature, and the short-term features, they are fused. Okay, to the decoder, and then to do the recognition or classification. Okay. So in addition to the architecture, we also propose some other innovations in the loss term, in the loss function. So essentially, we have added the class information in the denominator. Okay, and so this kind of novelty will encourage the same class of long-term features to be clustered and also to push apart the features from different features. So it's kind of contrastive learning. Okay. So this is a visualization regarding the memory bank, the long-term sequence samples, and also the short-term sequence samples. So as you can see, when they have the same label or the same class, they tended to have the higher similarity, while the different classes, they will lead to the low similarity. Okay, so this is actually what we want, and also encouraged by the proposed loss function. Okay. So here are some experimental results. T-2 essentially is different types of the model settings. The 10 and the 100. So essentially, these are 10 frames for the short term and the 100 frames for the long term. 6 frames short term and 60 frames for the long term. So 2 different settings, as you can see. The efficient GSM is just like a baseline backbone network, and the LMAN and MAL is our contribution. Essentially, is the network and also the loss function, respectively. So as you can see, including both of them will gain the greatest result. Okay, so this is also demonstrated. Our components are effective. Okay, we also compare with other different models from other previously publications. Essentially, the ST, GSM, some graph learning networks, and also the PCT and plus MCD. So this is one of the best before. And efficient GCN is essentially, we have mentioned it as a backbone. Okay. And also the comparison of the sequence lines. So different combinations of the short-term and the long-term sequence lines. So the larger short-term typically can use higher accuracy, and the long-term sequence lines, setting to 60 frames leads the best result. Okay, so we think the 60 frames, 1.8 seconds possess enough feature information, and also much longer. For example, 100 frames, they may contain irrelevant movements. Okay. So as a conclusion, we propose novel long-term memory augmented network is ISMAR, and also to innovate a bit on the memory augmented loss to encourage the same category or same class features to be clustered. Okay. And finally, we build a large-scale in-place gestures dataset. Essentially, it's a spatial temporal graph dataset. Okay. So finally, we have few demos to demonstrate its use. Okay. So this is a real-time gestures classification. As you can see, so here is accuracy, 0.99, something like that. Yeah. And also different patterns of gestures. Currently, it's working forward, backward, left, right. Yeah, this kind of gesture patterns. Okay, we have user study, and this is a demo video for it. So essentially, we deploy our trained model within this kind of scenario, user study scenario. And just as I mentioned in the beginning, so it will automatically recognize the gesture using the very short-term frames, and then to trigger the corresponding gesture. Okay, in the follow-up time frames. Okay. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan, for your presentation. Unfortunately, we are running out of time since we have the last presentation, which was planned to be the second one. It's an online presentation. We don't have time for questions. I'm very sorry, okay, since you have only 15 minutes yeah. with questions and you don't have enough time. Thank you again. Okay, let me introduce the last presentation. The title is VR Doc, Gaze-Based Interactions for VR Reading Experience. And the presenters is Johnson Lee. I think that okay, we see you, and so you can start.
Okay, I hope you can hear me well, by the way.
Yes, we can hear you, so you can start, you can proceed.
Thank you so much for the noted reaction. So good morning, everyone. I am saying hi from a 12-hour time difference. My name is Konsan Lee from University of Maryland, and today I'll be presenting our paper, VR Doc, Gaze-Based Interactions for VR Reading Experience. Again, thank you so much for the organizers and the chairs for being so understanding to allow this live stream presentation. So one of the most important aspects of the future of virtual reality or mixed reality is how it can expand our existing workspace to an infinite office space that is ever portable with a single device. However, such a promise is currently impeded since the very fundamental activity in order for us to work, which is reading, is considered difficult or rather undesirable in VR. So, in order to allow such opportunity to bloom to its fullest, we identified current pain points to investigate what is holding us back from enjoying reading in VR, and how can we resolve them in an interactional approach. Hence, we propose VRDoc, a set of gaze-based interactions designed to improve the VR reading experience. In terms of reading and interacting with documents in a VR or MR environment, there are highly related works such as reading in VR, as you can see in the figure on the left, or HoloDoc. Each of this work focuses on either presenting text in a more efficient way in VR, or exploring how physical documents can work with augmented artifacts in an MR environment. However, little has been explored in improving reading experiences with interactions. So to properly identify how we can make the reading experience desirable, we first had to see what made it undesirable. Hence, we first conducted a formative study to identify the pain points that may exist with a conventional interaction method. Here, participants were provided with commonly used 3D object manipulations, a laser point to move document objects at a distance, and a grab method for 6DOF manipulation of document objects that are at reach. They were asked to freely interact and read the documents presented with this method, and note that we also enabled trackpad scrolling for scrolling up and down long documents. So through observing users' behavior and collecting feedback through an interview, we were able to identify the following user pain points. First up is positioning. So when selecting a document, it took participants multiple attempts to reorient the document window into the desired position. Unlike general object manipulation, participants tended to have a preferred distance and orientation, which is upright, for reading. All of the participants mentioned that switching their attention between multiple documents made them more aware of this inconvenience. Also, participants reported that document readability was poor due to its resolution and distortion. We observed that participants tend to position the document with smaller font sizes closer to effectively magnify the font and to enhance readability. Last but not least comes arm fatigue. So during this 20-minute trial, participants tended to hold the VR controller up constantly to interact with the documents, even though when it wasn't completely necessary, such as trackpad scrolling. This naturally drives users to easily feel tired when they were holding the VR controller up. So this kind of gorilla arm effect is actually already known in the VR community to be a prevalent issue. So these were the 3 pain points that we were able to identify through our formative study. And to address user pain points, we developed 3 new tools. Our design thinking focused on resolving these exact pain points. And we believe that the eye tracking capability of a lot of commodity headset nowadays could be leveraged to develop solutions for some of these issues. Hence, we incorporated gaze into our solutions. First up is positioning. To simplify and automate the selection and positioning process, we have gaze, select, and snap. Here, the document object is highlighted with a green stroke when user's gaze stroke is detected. And by clicking on a VR controller button, the document object is snapped parallel to the user's head position. Next up is gaze mag glass. Since users often attempt to magnify text by bringing it up close, we thought a better solution would be selectively magnifying the current text the user is reading. Here, the magnifying glass effect is incorporated so that it is activated by users' eye movements and follows the eye movement. The user were allowed to turn it on or off as they need. Last but not least comes gaze scroll. So for reading longer documents, we have gaze scroll to alleviate arm fatigue caused by constant engagement with VR controllers. 2 gaze activated buttons are placed each at the top and bottom of the document, as you can see in the video clip here. And when the buttons are gazed at, the documents scroll up and down by approximately of a full sentence. These 3 new tools, Gaze Select and Snap, Gaze Mac Glass, and Gaze Scroll, we collectively refer to as VR Doc. So we conduct a series of user studies to investigate how users' reading experience change with VR Doc tools. 13 participants were recruited and wore an HTC Vive Pro Eye to utilize its eye tracking features. The experiments were held in a virtual office environment. And also note that the experiments were divided into individual tool evaluation and a combined evaluation. What we mean by that is that we had each of these 3 tasks specifically designed to test Gaze Select and Snap, again, Gaze Mac Glass, and Gaze Scroll. And for the final task, we had VR Doc, which is a combination of these 3 tools, and compared them with the baseline, which is the manipulation method that we provided through the formative study. So returning back, for the measures, we had objective measures such as task completion time, reading comprehension test, and for Gaze Mac Glass, because we allowed users to turn it on and off, we had activation time. For the subjective measures, we had usability, workload, and also readability, effectiveness, preference in a 7-point Likert scale. Now, as for results, we would likely to see whether each of the interaction tools were able to resolve the aforementioned pain points. First, for Gaze Select and Snap on positioning, Gaze Select and Snap showed the most promising and excellent results among the 3 VR Doc tools. We are able to observe readers significantly reducing time in selecting and reading documents of interest out of multiple documents. Participants also commonly mentioned how with a larger VR space, they would find Gaze Select and Snap even more useful to find and orient document windows. The quantitative results of the readability prove that Gaze Mac Glass successfully enhanced users' perceived readability when reading in VR. Gaze Mac Glass was the only feature that had an on and off option, since even in a real world scenario, we do not require magnification glasses at all times. For task 2 and task 4, we were able to observe that Gaze Mac Glass was activated for more than half of the time, which means that it is a necessary feature for reading in VR that will be likely used. Some of the participants commented that they anticipate this feature to be utilized when reading documents with a more complex structure, such as paragraphs with varying fonts or multi-column documents. In terms of fatigue, the SSQ results did not reveal a significant difference in fatigue when compared with the baseline and Gaze Scroll. This may be because in the experiment setting, readers were not required to go through documents for hours as much as we do in our daily lives. Gaze Scroll showed promising results in the measured participant subject perception, yet there were some mixed reviews. As conclusion, interviews comments indicated that integrating Gaze Scroll with trackpad scrolling will actually be more meaningful than using either just one of them. Finally comes for VR Doc's usability, effectiveness, and preference. VR Doc actually had a significantly higher score than the baseline for each of these 3 subjective measures. One of the more interesting parts that with these subjective measures, we are able to observe that VR Doc actually had the highest score even when compared to the individual evaluations, which kind of implies that there might be some kind of synergy effect by combining these tools rather than using them one by one. Participants also commented on how they actually felt that it was necessary for reader-specific interaction tools after they actually had a chance to use VR Doc. So finally comes to our conclusion and future work. Firstly, we presented an evaluated VR doc, a set of 3 gaze-based interaction tools that improves users' reading experience in VR. Our study offers insight on how gaze-based interactions could assist VR reading interfaces. And we also think that it would be worth investigating a detailed format of how the structure should be converted for optimal reading experiences in VR, going even further than providing interactions to make it usable. We also further aim to investigate collaborative interactions when multiple users read, share, and discuss documents. Thank you so much for listening to the presentation. This was Kansan Lee, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. We have time for just a very quick question, since we are quite ready for lunch.
Okay, thank you for a great talk. And I'm Rico Otono from NICE. And I heard questions that for example, I read the newspapers that not only in the document, not only their words, I also can see their image. And especially in VR space, not only image, we also can manipulate objects. And in this case, the eye gaze movement be different from the case that we only see their words and the documents. And so do you have any idea or some interface idea about how to do in such a case?
So yeah, this is more of a first step of how reading in VR can be perceived to users and how it can be actually more feasible in a very practical case. I do agree that with these different figures that we actually experience in our daily lives would drastically impact the whole reading behavior of users. So there must be some follow-up experiments that could prove that these these tools that we just provided are still working, even though there are these different formats, again, columns, different fonts, or even different colors within these documents. I will be really happy to look into any researchers out there that would be interested in digging into this question even furthermore, but that is actually a very fair point. Again, I would consider this work to be more as a fundamental work towards interactions with text-based documents.
Thanks, Justin, for your presentation. This was the very quick question, a last very quick question.
Yeah, thank you for a nice presentation. I'd like to ask about the sickness, because while reading in VR, I think there will be some some conflicts, like accommodation begins conflict. So how do you think about the VR sickness while reading, and how do you think about the future of the reading activity in VR?
So for our experiment specifically, we did again, we had a subjective measure for SSQ questionnaires, and it did not signify any kind of significant difference between the pre and post experiments, which means that users were not really sick while reading these documents. But I do agree with a very different space where suppose that users have to move around a lot to read different documents. There may be some difficulties for those who have a lot of motion sickness. I guess the future of reading in VR is a rather broad question. But one thing I am sure is that it is definitely an area that has been neglected, because we are naturally geared towards to experience-based applications in VR, and rather neglecting the work context that is actually really important in order for VR to be more of its commercial success. So again, I think these are all very good questions and things that us as a research community should be solving together. But again, thank you so much for the great question.
Thank you again. This ends the session. Thank you everybody for attending the interaction technique session. Now there is the lunch break. Bye-bye.